Chapter 1031. No matter how pure a woman was, like Lin Ji, she had only debuted for a year and was already tamed. However, Yun Shusha's temperament was very similar to Allur's. She had the same arrogance, and the same desire to conquer her. Lin Ji looked at Li Dongliang's eyes, which never left Yun Shusha, and suddenly felt a sense of crisis. She had spent so much effort to get the female lead role of Lethal Beauty. How could she allow others to snatch it away? Therefore, she tried even harder to please Li Dongliang. However, no matter how much Lin Ji tried to please him, the evil fire in Li Dongliang's eyes could not be quelled. Only he himself knew what his ambition was. Therefore, when the banquet ended, the representatives of Universal Pictures and Huanyu Entertainment signed the document, which meant that the banquet had come to an end. Li Dongliang had a good relationship with Kong Xiaoqian. Before the banquet, they had already informed each other, so Li Quan naturally knew about it. After the banquet ended, Li Quan and Yun Shusha sent off the representatives of Universal Pictures as a courtesy. Li Quan said to Yun Shusha, "Shusha, you stay here and accompany Mr. Li. I'll go and settle the bill first." Yun Shusha opened her mouth and wanted to refuse, but Li Quan left the room without looking back and closed the door. She sat down dejectedly and looked at Li Dongliang cautiously. All the cells and nerves in her body were instantly in a state of alert. She did not know why, but from the first time she saw this man, she felt wary. Especially that pair of eyes, which kept staring at her, sizing her up again and again, as if he was staring at his prey. It made her feel really uneasy. Li Dongliang saw that her eyes were drifting back and forth, and she couldn't sit still. He suddenly felt a little strange. Did Kong Xiaoqian not tell this woman what to do? Or was this woman playing hard to get, pretending to be young and innocent? Li Quan left for a long time and did not return. At first, Li Dongliang was still chatting with her seriously, but gradually, he started to talk about dirty jokes. Yun Shusha couldn't sit still. She hurriedly said, "Director Li, I'll go and see if Li Quan has." "Hey, why are you still looking at him?" "Li Quan has already left," Li Dongliang said with a smile. Yun Shusha was a little confused, but she didn't think too much about it, so she explained, "How could Secretary Li leave?" "He still has to send me back later," Li Dongliang said. "I'll send you back. I wonder if Miss Yun is willing to give me this face." Yun Shusha quickly waved her hand and laughed awkwardly. "How can I accept that? Why are you embarrassed? Miss Yun, please don't be so courteous with me. Or are you unwilling to give me face?" Li Dongliang's smile became more and more intriguing. Yun Shusha lowered her head. She was really unwilling to let him send her back. Not to mention that she didn't want to be too close to him, just the thought of sitting in his car made her feel uncomfortable. But looking at his eyes, it seemed like she couldn't reject him. She thought about how she didn't give him face at the banquet. Now that he was kind enough to send her home, if she kept rejecting him, wouldn't she not even give him a way out? If she still didn't give him some face, she would really be going overboard. Thinking about it, even though she was really unwilling, Yun Shusha couldn't reject him anymore. Chapter 1032. Left with no choice, Yun Shusha could only nod in agreement. However, when she saw the unconcealable sharpness in his eyes, she felt her right eyelid twitch violently again. As for Li Quan, the bill was directly deducted from the company's account. Paying the bill was just an excuse for him to slip away. Kong Xiaoqian had already told him that Yun Shusha was a gift for Li Dongliang, so she reminded him to leave after the meal. As for Yun Shusha, she would leave her to Li Dongliang to enjoy. Li Quan could naturally tell that Yun Shusha was kept in the dark until now. She did not even know that this was not a dinner party but a shocking scam set up by Kong Xiaoqian. The so-called dinner party was just for her to accompany an old man and sell her to him. In this materialistic era, having money meant having power. Li Dongliang's net worth was huge. Although his foundation was not deep, he was still a prominent entrepreneur in the capital. He was ruthless and was someone Li Quan could not afford to offend. Although he felt sorry for Yun Shusha and even felt that it was unfair, he could only think about it in his heart. Not to mention Li Dongliang, even Kong Xiaoqian could crush him with a single finger. Just as he was thinking this, he walked out of the hotel and saw Mu Shi, who had just alighted from a taxi, rushing toward the hotel's entrance. He was stunned and narrowed his eyes curiously. He seemed to recognize this girl. She was Yoon Shusha's assistant and had a good relationship with Yoon Shusha. Seeing her rush through the door, he hurriedly grabbed her wrist. She was stunned. When she looked up and saw Lee Kwan, her eyes lit up and she quickly asked, "Secretary Lee." "Just in time. I'm looking for Shusha. Did you see her?" He frowned and hesitated for a moment before asking, "Why are you looking for her?" She was not wary of him and said impatiently, "I overheard Mr. Kong saying that Yoon Shusha is accompanying a client at the company's entrance, so I rushed over." "Where's Shusha? Where is she?" Lee Kwan pursed his lips and frowned. He asked curiously, "She's just an unknown artist in the company. It doesn't matter who department head Kong wants her to accompany. Besides, it's normal for artists to accompany people to dinner." Hearing this, Han Xiaoxiao felt very uncomfortable. She couldn't help but frown slightly as she retorted, "Don't tell me it's natural for celebrities to eat with others. Wasn't this a little too much? Besides, you also know that Li Dongliang." "Enough," he interrupted her impatiently. "Mushi, aren't you already off work? Why are you here?" "Of course I'm here to find Shusha." Mushi craned her neck and peered inside before grumbling, "I heard from Kong Xiaoqian that she made Yoon Shusha sleep with Li Dongliang. So aren't you worried?" When Li Quan heard this, he was a little flustered. However, he pretended to be serious and said coldly, "You can't talk nonsense like this. Be careful not to let department head Kong hear you and fire you." "But I clearly heard it with my own ears. How can it be fake?" With that, she wanted to barge into the hotel. "I'm going to find her." He hurriedly pulled her back. "Where are you going?" Chapter 1033. Li Quan sighed. "Stop fooling around, Mushi. Yoon Shusha has already returned to the company. You shouldn't stay here. Don't you still have to work tomorrow?" Yoon Shusha was wanted by Li Dongliang, and Kong Xiaoqian had already established a good relationship with him. How could he let her take her away? Besides, how could she afford to offend someone like Li Dongliang? "Really?" She looked at him skeptically. "Did she return to the company?" He nodded without a change in expression. "Yes. What else could it be? She just left." Seeing that she was still doubtful, he half pushed and half pulled her toward the car park. "Let's go. It's on the way, I'll send you home." She let him pull her arm in a daze, but she kept looking back at the hotel entrance, which was getting further and further away from her. She suddenly had a bad feeling. It was only when she got into the car and drove for a while that she realized that things might not be as simple as they seemed. She hurriedly shouted for him to alight. Of course, he was unwilling to stop the car. She started making a fuss in the car. "Secretary Lee, let me out. I'm warning you, Yoon Shusha's identity is not simple. Don't think that she's just an ordinary artiste." "What? Are you threatening me?" Li Quan narrowed his eyes, the look in his eyes dangerous. She snorted and puffed out her chest. "What if I tell you that she's Chairman Mu's woman?" The car came to a sudden stop. He widened his eyes in shock. "What did you say?" "Yoon Shusha is Chairman Mu's woman, if she gets hurt." He. You should have heard of Chairman Mu's methods. Don't blame me for not warning you when the time comes. She was not to be outdone. He was skeptical. If she's really Master Mu's woman, why is she working in a place like Showbiz? Mushi, being Master Mu's woman means endless glory and wealth. Mushi, where did you get this rumor from? What a joke. She snorted and mocked his ignorance. She did not care what he thought and immediately got out of the car. She slammed the door shut and said fiercely, "Li Quan, if anything happens to Shusha, you're finish." After saying that, she turned around and ran towards the hotel. Li Quan sat in the driver's seat in a daze, unable to regain his senses for a long time. At the same time, Yoon Shusha sat in Li Dongliang's car, feeling uneasy. Li Dongliang sat in the back seat. She wanted to sit in the front passenger seat, but Li Dongliang said it was against the rules. Thus, she had no choice but to sit in the back seat while trembling with fear. However, she deliberately kept a distance from him. She told the driver the address and sat close to the door. However, she saw that the road outside the car window was a little strange. She turned her head and reminded the driver, "Mr. Driver, this is not the way back to the company. We should have taken that path." The driver shook his head and smiled, but he didn't say anything. Li Dongliang teased, "Don't worry, he knows what he's doing. Is Miss Yoon afraid that we'll sell you out?" Yoon Shusha shook her head and then lowered her head without saying anything. She fiddled with her fingers. The atmosphere in the car made her feel extremely uncomfortable. She really wanted Li Dongliang to leave her by the roadside and take a taxi home alone. As the car sped along the road, the scenery outside the window kept changing. She felt more and more that something was wrong. Chapter 1034. She sat up uneasily and leaned against the window to look around. She frowned and said, "This is clearly going in the opposite direction of the company." Li Dongliang smiled eerily and said, "Of course not." Yoon Shusha turned around abruptly and asked, "Then where are we going?" She looked a little flustered and incredulous. Li Dongliang clearly said that he would send her back. Why did he go back on his word now? What she couldn't understand was that she didn't know where he was taking her. "Mr. Li, just drop me off here. I'll take a taxi back," Li Dongliang said. "This place is so remote. How can you get a taxi? You're a girl. Isn't it unsafe?" Yoon Shusha was angry. She didn't care about his status and raised her voice. "Mr. Li, you have to understand that you're the one who brought me to this so-called remote place. I clearly told you the company's address, but why did you drive to this place? What are your intentions? If you're really worried about me, it's useless to say all this here. Why don't you send me back to the company now?" Li Dongliang stared at her for a long time and suddenly laughed out loud. Yoon Shusha looked at him strangely. She really didn't know what was so funny. "Hurry up and send me home. What if?" Li Dongliang muttered slowly, "I don't want to." Yoon Shusha widened her eyes and looked at the evil glint in his eyes. She suddenly reacted and quickly forced herself to calm down. She narrowed her eyes and asked with a cold smile, "What exactly do you want?" Li Dongliang raised his eyebrows disapprovingly. "We're already in the car. Are you still going to play dumb with me? Don't you know what you're here for? Didn't Kong Xiaoqian teach you?" Yoon Shusha frowned. "What am I here for? Of course I'm here to discuss the film contract with you. But now that the dinner is over, don't you think you should let me go back?" She was not an idiot, nor was she a woman with a low EQ like Mu Yaja had described her to be. If she still couldn't tell what was going on, then she should really go for an IQ test. She could tell that the man in front of her was very interested in her. She could also tell that he had ulterior motives. She had already felt that something was wrong with him, but she didn't think too deeply about it. Firstly, during the banquet, he didn't make any aggressive movements or expressions towards her. Secondly, she believed that with Li Dongliang's status, he would never lack women, let alone a woman like her. Ever since the banquet had ended, all the things he had done to her had alarmed her greatly. Therefore, she tried her best to keep a distance from him. When she first entered the company, she had heard about some unspoken rules. She had also heard about drinking and sleeping with others. However, she had never thought that such a thing would happen to her one day. "Sleep with him? Accompany my ass. That Kong Xiaoqian is too much." He clearly knew that it was such an improper dinner party, yet he still let her come. He obviously did it on purpose. Yoon Shusha clenched her fists and said coldly, "Li Dongliang, I advise you to send me back. I'm not the kind of woman you think I am." Chapter 1035. "Oh. Then what do you want?" "Heh, I can give you anything." As he spoke, he slowly approached her like a wild beast eyeing its prey, his eyes radiating aggression. "Didn't you want the female lead of Lethal Beauty? I'll give it to you. How about it? You have to know that this role was originally reserved for Lin Ji. You saw how hard she tried to fight for this role. But as long as you serve me well, with one word from me, this role will be yours. How about it?" Yoon Shusha kept retreating until her back was almost pressed against the car door. Her breathing quickened. "Or are you saying that one role isn't enough? What do you want? Just say it. Diamond? Villa? Or luxury car? It's not like I can't afford it. As long as you perform well." As he spoke, he reached out to touch her cheek. Yoon Shusha waved his hand away and screamed, "Get lost. Don't touch me. Even if I want that role, I'll fight for it with my own abilities." Ha ha ha. As though he had heard the funniest joke in the world, Li Dongliang laughed sinisterly. Abilities? You want to fight for it with your own abilities? Yoon Shusha, you're too naive. Be good, I won't hurt you. On the contrary, I'll dote on you a lot. Li Dongliang leaned close to her and smiled even more greedily. How about it? Yoon Shusha, be my lover. I can give you everything you want. Wealth, status and even power. Whatever you want, I can give it to you. Get lost. Get lost. Yoon Shusha pushed him away with both hands. I don't care about what you're saying. Get lost. Let me out of the car. Why? Not enough. Li Dongliang snorted coldly. The smile on his face suddenly disappeared and his face turned gloomy. Yoon Shusha, I advise you not to be too greedy. I've never had much patience for women. When Yoon Shusha heard this, she felt that his words were too harsh. She instinctively raised her hand and gave him a tight slap. Li Dongliang was stunned by this sudden slap. He covered his face and stared at her in a daze, as if he had never thought that this woman would have such gut. Yoon Shusha also realized what she had done on impulse. She retracted her hand in a daze, held her burning palm, and bit her lip tightly. The scenery outside the window behind him kept changing. After a while, Li Dongliang finally regained his composure. However, he was so angry that he laughed. Yoon Shusha, how dare you hit me? Yoon Shusha raised her head and said word by word, Director Li, I think you misunderstood something. At first, I thought there was an important film appointment I needed to talk about. But, I didn't expect this to be what awaited me. Since that's the case, I don't think there's anything to talk about between us. My work is over. It's my honor that you're willing to send me home. But if you're not willing, you can just leave me by the roadside. As for the lover, diamond, villa, do I care? Even if I like it, Mu Yaja will give it to me. You don't have to do anything. Yoon Shusha smiled and said, Mu Yaja, how many Mu Yajas are there in the capital? Although she didn't want to bring up Mu Yaja, she had no choice but to do so in order to protect herself. Chapter 1036. Only then did she nod her head in agreement. Li Dongliang suddenly grabbed her collar and pulled her to his chest. He gave her a hard slap and coldly reprimanded, Damn it. Are you toying with me? Mu Yaja. If you're really Mu Yaja's woman, why do you need to be in the entertainment industry? Bah. With your status, you still want to get close to young Master Mu? In your dreams. Why would he believe her words? Who was Mu Yaja? Mu Yaja was the leader of Dishing's financial group. What did Dishing mean? It meant that the stock market would tremble if Dishing stomped its feet. As Mu Yaja's woman, it meant that she was rich and powerful. Why would she need to be in the entertainment industry? What an international joke. It was not that he did not know Mu Yaja. How could he not know such a well-known name? Even if it's him, if he wants to gain a foothold in the capital, he must rely on the Mu Jia's protection. But what did this woman say? She claimed to be Mu Yaja's woman? To him, she was just a woman who was tossed aside after playing with her. Yoon Shusha was caught off guard and fell onto her seat. She was in a sorry state. Before she could get up, she was pinned down by him. Unlike Mu Yaja, this man did not know his limits. His entire weight was on her. Yoon Shusha was having a hard time bearing the weight of a middle-aged man. But more than that, she was filled with humiliation. She was an actress. It was because she loved acting and acting that she entered the entertainment industry. But why was it that in this man's eyes, an actress was a lowly status? Was she as lowly as a prostitute? She desperately slapped his shoulders with both hands and screamed in horror, Don't. Get lost. Get lost. What are you trying to say? What? Do you still want to use that brat to pressure me? A sinister and obscene smile appeared on Li Dongliang's face, causing one's hair to stand on end. He reached out his hand without any fear and pinched her soft waist. He laughed wickedly. Ha ha ha. Good. Even if you are Mu Yaja's woman, I'll treat you as his woman. Today was the perfect day. I want to have a good taste of Mu Yaja's woman. As he spoke, he pinched her chin and bit her neck. Yoon Shusha cried out involuntarily. No matter how strong a girl was, she had never encountered such an uncontrollable situation. She was so frightened that tears almost rolled down her cheeks. She kept struggling and pushing him away. She bit and hit him on the shoulder like a wild cat that had gone mad. Even Li Dongliang could not withstand such a violent struggle. His face was hit many times, and it was burning with pain. He raised his head and slapped her angrily. Seeing that she was still restless, he really wanted to do her in the car. Yoon Shusha was no match for him. She knew what was going to happen next. She screamed at the top of her lungs, Li Dongliang, don't tell me you want to offend Mu Yaja. Li Dongliang was stunned as he looked at her tear-stained face. She looked pitiful and aggrieved. But that gaze was still extremely sharp and even had a hint of provocation. It was simply an eyesore. In his eyes, Yoon Shusha's domineering attitude was akin to that of a proud and spoiled canary. Did men not understand men? Chapter 1037. Li Dongliang guessed that Mu Yaja was only interested in her on the spur of the moment. With his status, he was used to seeing women who flocked to him like a flock of ducks. Once in a while, there would be an arrogant and unruly woman. Naturally, he would find it interesting and tease her a little. However, as time went by, his interest in teasing her faded. One must know that a man of Mu Yaja's status would not be interested in just any woman. This Yoon Shusha was just a plaything to Mu Yaja. There were two popular sayings in the industry. No amount of flattery could compare to a single word from young Master Mu. It was hard to climb into the entertainment industry, but the hardest part was climbing into young Master Mu's bed. Did this woman really think that young Master Mu was sincere toward her? He suddenly inched closer to her face and laughed in a low voice. You're just a woman. Why? Is Mu Yaja allowed to lay his hands on you and press you under his body, but I'm not allowed to sleep with you? You're just a woman. How precious can you be? I don't believe that Mu Yaja would go against me for a woman like you. I want you. Who dares to go against me? Damn it. As he spoke, Li Dongliang's movements became more aggressive. Yoon Shusha clenched her fists in fear. She stared at him without blinking, afraid that he would do something scary. In this tense atmosphere, the chauffeur suddenly said respectfully, Boss, we're here. Li Dongliang looked at her and snorted coldly. He pushed open the car door and grabbed her hair harshly, practically dragging her out of the car. Yoon Shusha struggled all the way, muttering that name in her heart over and over again. Mu Yaja, Mu Yaja. Late at night, a Bugatti Veyron stopped steadily at the hotel entrance. The car door opened, and a slender figure stepped out of the car. The man walked quickly into the hotel. The lobby manager walked up to him politely, and when he saw him, he immediately bowed respectfully with a humble smile on his face. Master Mu. Mu Yaja didn't even look at him. He just asked coldly, where is he? His voice was low and cold, revealing a dangerous and oppressive aura, causing people to be shocked. However, he couldn't figure out the meaning behind Mu Yaja's words. The smile on his face froze for 2 seconds before he asked carefully, Young Master Mu, who are you talking about? Mu Yaja's eyes suddenly flashed with a cold light. He grabbed him by the collar and said, I'm asking you, where is she? Are you playing dumb with me? The lobby manager was frightened. Even though he had seen many big scenes, he was still frightened by his aggressive appearance. He cried, Master Mu, I'm really sorry. I really don't know who you're looking for. Mu Yaja sneered. Very good. Just then, Mu Shi arrived. It was extremely difficult to hail a cab, so she practically ran all the way to the hotel. Li Quan said that Yoon Shusha had returned to the company, but she didn't believe him. She called Yoon Shusha's phone on the way, but it was turned off. She then called Yoon Shusha's spare phone, but no one picked up. Only then did she realize that things had gotten out of hand. She anxiously rushed to the hotel and saw the tall figure standing in the middle of the hotel lobby. She was elated and quickly ran toward him. Chapter 1038. Mu Yaja turned around, and with a look, the security guard understood and made way for him. Mu Shi ran to his side and asked while panting, Where's Shusha? The lobby manager was even more puzzled, but he did not dare to ask further. Mu Shi gritted her teeth and looked at him anxiously. I'm asking you, where is she? Where is she? The manager was about to cry. I really don't know who Yun Shusha is. Mu Yaja narrowed his eyes dangerously. You don't know who she is? Then I'll tell you now, that's my woman. The lobby manager's face turned pale in an instant. He turned around and ordered the cashier to search for information on Yun Shusha. Mu Shi could not care less, though. Global Pictures and Huanyu Entertainment have a dinner today. Li Dongliang. You should know who he is, right? Have you ever seen him? At the mention of Li Dongliang, he remembered and hurriedly said with trepidation, Mr. Li left just now. It seems that he took a woman with him, but Master Mu. I'm really sorry, I don't know where he took her. How long has he been gone? It's been a while. It should be around 15 minutes. Mu Shi wanted to ask more, but from the corner of her eye, she saw Mu Yaja suddenly turn around and walk toward the entrance. She did not have time to think and hurriedly followed him. Mr. Mu, think of something. Yun Shusha must have been taken away by Li Dongliang. Shut up. Mu Yaja was feeling frustrated, and his tone could not help but become harsher. Mu Shi was so frightened that she trembled all over and did not dare to speak again. He took out his phone and dialed his assistant's number. The moment the call connected, he ordered coldly, find out Li Dongliang's current whereabouts. Now, immediately. Also, get the head of Huanyu's PR department to give me a call. Yes. Master Mu. Mu Yaja hung up the phone and got into the car. Mu Shi stood outside the car door with her hands clasped together. She was extremely worried, too, but she was still trembling with fear, not daring to get into the car. Mu Yaja glanced at her and rubbed his forehead with his slender fingers. Get in the car. Mu Shi was stunned for a moment before returning to her senses. She nodded and got into the car. The car sped away. Along the way, the atmosphere in the carriage was extremely stifling. Mu Shi could feel the terrifyingly low pressure emanating from Mu Yaja's body, which could kill without leaving a trace. She didn't dare to speak, she didn't even dare to breathe. She carefully looked at his cold profile, his cold eyes looking straight ahead. The man's expression was cold. His cold and distant phoenix eyes were like an endless abyss, captivating people's souls. His angular facial features were hidden in the shadows, making him look even more exquisite. She secretly cursed. He must be extremely worried about Yun Shusha now, right? In this extremely quiet moment, the phone suddenly rang. Mu Shi was startled. Mu Yaja glanced at her from the corner of his eyes and answered the call expressionlessly. Hello. Chairman Mu? I'm Kong Xiaoqian. An extremely sweet voice came from the other end. I didn't expect you to still remember me. Why do you have the time to think of me today? Mu Yaja's lips slightly tugged into a half-smile. If Kong Xiaoqian were to see his current expression, she would definitely shudder. How's your father's health? Chapter 1039. Is that so? I'm afraid your father is going to lose this juicy piece of meat. Mu Yaja smiled without batting an eyelid. Kong Xiaoqian's laughter immediately stopped. She was confused and did not understand what was going on. Mu Yaja's sudden contact with her was, in fact, very surprising to her. After all, this man's status was so high and mighty. Meanwhile, she was just a lowly director of the public relations department. She had only met this man once at Huanyu's gala last year, let alone have a close relationship with him. Her first impression of him was that he was domineering, handsome, and heroic. However, she knew her place and knew this man could only be seen from afar. With her status, it was impossible for her to get close to him. She secretly wondered how she had offended this big shot. Just as she was feeling puzzled, Mu Yaja suddenly sneered and said nonchalantly, as a dignified public relations representative of Huanyu, you actually allowed your employees to attend such a banquet. This makes me doubt your father's character a little. Dishing doesn't want to work with such a company either. In the future, the Kong Consortium will also be blacklisted. Kong Xiaoqian turned pale with fright. Before she could react, she heard Mu Yaja issue such a death sentence. She was stunned for a moment. Even as she racked her brains, she really could not figure out what he meant. Hence, she smiled stiffly and asked, Chairman Mu, what do you mean by that? I really don't get it. You don't get it. Mu Yaja curled his lips. You'll understand very soon. After that, he hung up the phone expressionlessly. Then he called his assistant and asked him to inform the board of directors about the cancellation of several contracts with the Kong Consortium. He also asked him to stop all the work he was doing and start preparing for the acquisition of the Kong Consortium. Not long after this order was issued, the Kong Consortium's CEO, Kong Chishian, called him in horror. When he answered the call, a middle-aged man's desperate voice came from the other end with a trembling voice. Chairman Mu, what the hell is going on? Why did you suddenly cancel the contract with the Kong Consortium? Elder Kong, we still have to ask your daughter about this matter. What exactly did she do? Mu Yaja's lukewarm tone made Kong Chishian even more worried. His tone was still polite, but there was an irrevocable determination in his words. It seemed the Mu Consortium was determined to go against the Kong Consortium. Kong Chishian's hand that was holding the phone trembled slightly. He was no longer young and was once a ruthless businessman in the business world. When he was young, he did things swiftly and decisively. But now, he was old. In a few years' time, he would have to abdicate and hand over the massive Kong Consortium to his precious daughter. Although Kong Xiaoqian was usually arrogant and willful, she wasn't stubborn or mischievous. She was quite steady in her work. She had been with Kong Chishian since she was young, so she handled business matters in an orderly manner. He had always been at ease and comforted her. Kong Chishian had a daughter at an old age, and he only had one daughter, Kong Xiaoqian. He had doted on her since she was young, so he loved her very much. On this day, just as he was lying down to rest, Kong Xiaoqian called him while crying. She said incoherently, Dad, I'm finished. Chapter 1040. After hanging up, Kong Chishian stood up from his desk and paced back and forth anxiously in front of the window. He then made a few more calls to urge Kong Xiaoqian to hurry home. The entire board of directors of the Kong Consortium was in a mess. How could the older directors sit still? They made one phone call after another to ask about what had happened and what the Kong Consortium had done to offend the Mu Consortium. When Kong Xiaoqian rushed home, Kong Chishian was sitting at his desk and smoking a cigarette sullenly after being infuriated by the directors. When he saw her return with red eyes, he slammed his palm on the table and asked with narrowed eyes, Tell me, what did you do to offend Mu Yaja for him to deal with the Kong Consortium like this? Kong Chishian had never lost his temper with her before, even if he did. Kong Xiaoqian was startled by his gloomy expression and could not help but take a step back. She stood quietly at the door with her head lowered and sobbed. Kong Chishian was already frustrated to begin with. When he saw her sulking and crying, he got even more anxious. He raised his voice and said, What are you crying for? Are you still afraid to admit the trouble you caused? Kong Xiaoqian still did not dare to speak. She kept wiping away her tears, and her exquisite makeup was in a terrible state. More than half of it was ruined and she looked extremely ugly. Kong Chishian's expression turned even uglier. He rebuked her angrily, Say something. I don't know either. Kong Xiaoqian looked up and said, I just think I've done something stupid. Sun Hua came to me and told me that if I sent Yun Shusha to Li Dongliang's side, Li Dongliang would be able to inject funds into the East Bay project to make up for the shortfall. But how could I have known that Yun Shusha would have such a background? Kong Chishian was so angry that he was glaring at her. I don't want to listen to such useless things. Tell me, what did you do to her? Tell me. Kong Xiaoqian sobbed and told him everything that had happened. This infuriated the old man. He clutched his chest and fell back into his chair. He said bitterly, I was planning to hand the Kong Consortium over to you because I thought highly of your capabilities. You're also the only heir of the Kong Consortium in the future, so I was confident that I could entrust it to you. But you did this to me. I let you join Huanyu so that you can gain more experience. But you actually did such a heinous thing. Xiaoqian, Xiaoqian, you're usually very steady in your work. Why are you so muddle-headed this time? She's so young, yet she's learning from others in the business world. I think you're a complete scoundrel. Kong Xiaoqian was already feeling guilty. She stood in front of the table with a red face and didn't say a word. Kong Chixian patted his chest and finally managed to catch his breath. He frowned and continued, "Who is Li Dongliang? Why are you still hanging out with that old thing? Don't you know what kind of person he is? He likes to mess around. You know how much he likes to play with women. In this industry, who doesn't know that he has played with a few female celebrities? You clearly knew, yet you still sent her over. When did your heart become so vicious? Would that woman still be fine in his hands? What are you waiting for?" Kong Xiaoqian was still rooted to the spot. Kong Chixian glared at her and said angrily, "What are you waiting for?" Chapter 1041. Speaking of Li Dongliang, the big boss of Universal Pictures, he had played with many actresses. More than half of the artists and singers in the company had affairs with him. Everyone in the industry knew that there were not many artists who were packaged by Universal Pictures that were clean. This was a transparent rule within Universal. However, after seeing so many women with heavy makeup, Yun Shusha, who was pure and refined like a lotus flower, immediately aroused his desire to conquer her. Yun Shusha gave people a forbidden temptation. This kind of girl could not only make men want to conquer her, but also make them feel pity for her. It was exactly his favorite style. When he thought about how this kind of woman was taken by someone else, he was not without unwillingness in his heart. When he thought about how that man would be so close to her body and enjoy this sweet beauty as he wished, his heart felt like it was being scratched by a cat's paw. He could not help but feel angry and jealous. It was not that he had never seen a woman more beautiful than her. However, this girl had a bewitching temperament. That pair of flirtatious eyebrows, just a look, was extremely beautiful. Just thinking about that white and graceful body and those two slender and beautiful legs made Li Dongliang's heart itch unbearably. The tightness in his lower abdomen was extremely uncomfortable. After throwing Yun Shusha into the bedroom and locking the door, Yun Shusha immediately kept a safe distance from him. He narrowed his eyes and sized her up. The room was pitch black. The moonlight slanted in from the window and enveloped her whole body. She clenched her teeth tightly and frowned. Supporting herself with her arms, she pulled herself up. Looking at Li Dongliang, who was closing in on her, she could not help but step back vigilantly. Her breathing was a little hurried. You're not allowed to come over." Yun Shusha shuddered. "Me. We're already here, and your little mouth is still so fierce. See how I'll deal with you later. See how I'll tame this woman later." Li Dongliang stared at her anxiously, but his hands did not stop moving. He took off his clothes without asking. In a flash, the middle-aged old man in front of her was half-naked. It had to be said that the old lecher in front of him was really a bit of a blemish. He had a head of sparse hair and a square face. His cheeks were slightly sunken, but his eye bags were extremely full. Following his line of sight, his figure was really unsightly. His body was so fat that it oozed oil, and he had a beer belly. There didn't seem to be any muscles on his body. Yun Shusha was shocked and her mind went blank. Looking at Li Dongliang, she really didn't want to think in that direction. But even the dumbest person would know what was going to happen next. He was trying to force her to submit. Yun Shusha was furious. She was being sent here and there like a cheap commodity. She had no dignity at all. She bit her lip, only to see the man walking towards her quickly. In an instant, her heartbeat seemed to have stopped, and her heart was stuck in her throat. She felt like she was suffocating. "Don't come over. Don't come any closer." She almost screamed out loud. Her heart trembled, and at the same time, she took a step forward. Almost entirely relying on her remaining mental strength and rationality, she jumped up from the bed like a cat and rushed towards the door with large stride. Chapter 1042. The belt left a bloody mark on Yun Shusha's arm. She stumbled a few steps back and accidentally knocked over a chair, falling to the ground. Her back and the back of her head collided violently with the cold and hard marble floor. Accompanied by a jolt of pain, the world spun before her eyes. "Damn it. Stupid B*TCH, I gave you some color and you really dared to open a dye shop for me. Heh." Li Dongliang scolded her with vulgar words and approached her step by step. As he anxiously tore off his clothes, a lewd smile appeared on his face. In a fit of anger, He took off his suit pants and pounced on her like a hungry wolf. Yoon Shusha screamed and rolled on the ground in a panic to avoid him. She tried to get up from the ground in a flurry, but he grabbed the ends of her hair and yanked her back violently. A numbing pain came from her scalp. That ferocious strength was not at all merciful. She felt as if her scalp was about to be peeled off. Yoon Shusha let out a low cry as tears suddenly welled up in her eyes. Lee Dongliang hugged her shoulders and flipped her over, pressing her under him. He sat on top of her and chuckled. His rough palms patted her cheeks forcefully, his words filled with extreme dissatisfaction. Yoon Shusha, I'm telling you, today, I'm definitely going to have you. Don't fail to appreciate my kindness. Do you think that you can mix in this industry as you wish and that you can reach the heavens in a single bound just because you have a pretty face? Haha. Don't be too naive. Once you're in this industry, how will it be up to you? Let go of me. Let go of you. Haha. What kind of dream are you having? Lee Dongliang stared at this exquisitely sculpted face. His large palm roughly kneaded her waist, and the smooth and tight feeling made him relax his brows in satisfaction. Damn, her skin was not just soft and supple. It really wasn't a waste of all the effort he had put in to get this girl. Yoon Shusha's hands were firmly pressed against his chest as she stared at him angrily. Her pair of watery eyes were misty, giving her a seductive look. Lee Dongliang's interest was piqued when he saw the hostile look on that face. He narrowed his eyes and smiled. What? You're not willing? What? Yoon Shusha, don't tell me you're at a disadvantage by following me. As he spoke, he reached out to grab her collar and tore it apart forcefully. Yoon Shusha was shocked. She held his hand tightly, not letting him have his way. During the tugging, her nails scratched the back of his hand. Lee Dongliang shuddered in pain. In a fit of rage, he waved his hand and gave her a tight slap. The strength of this slap was definitely not light. Yoon Shusha's face was slapped to the side, and the corner of her lips knocked against her teeth. Under the dull pain, there was a cut, and the taste of blood filled her mouth. She was embarrassed, angry, in pain, and scared. The tip of her nose was slightly sour, but she stubbornly refused to shed a single tear. Lee Dongliang was also very angry. His face did not look pleasant as he choked her neck. The lust in his body was screaming, but he could not vent it out. This made him even more irritable. Chapter 1043. Yoon Shusha's mouth was wide open. With her throat choked by him, she was suffocated and unable to speak. He bit down hard on her jade-like earlobe. His hot breath blew onto her neck, causing her cheeks to turn red. Her entire face was boiling hot. His large palm started to touch her body up and down unruly. The soft texture immediately made his body tense up. Yoon Shusha struggled with all her might and used all her strength to push him away. However, although this Lee Dongliang didn't train well, he was still a man after all. How could Yoon Shusha compare to his strength? With his entire body's weight, how could she push him away so easily? No. Let go of me. No. Yoon Shusha shouted in humiliation as she hit his shoulders with both hands. Her voice was already hoarse. Lee Dongliang obviously wouldn't listen to her. A lewd smile appeared on his face as he caressed her waist wantonly. His lower abdomen was tightly pressed against hers as he impatiently moved towards her lip. Yoon Shusha suddenly turned her head and avoided him pathetically. It was as if her entire soul had fallen into an endless black hole and she was unable to extricate herself from it. Lee Dongliang was very unhappy with her avoidance and sneered sarcastically. You're not a virgin anymore. Why are you being so pretentious? Yoon Shusha pursed her lips and shook her head. However, her pair of eyes stubbornly widened. Her eyes were bloodshot and misty, but there was a different kind of charm to them. This was a woman who could easily arouse a man's desire to conquer, a woman who could make a man's heart ache and pity her. Yoon Shusha, follow me. I can give you everything you want. If you follow me, you can debut and release a film. I'll use all my resources to support you. I'll pave the way for you. Whatever you want, you can ask me and I'll satisfy you one by one. How about it? If you follow me, I'll dote on you and love you well. Be my woman. Don't reject me again. As he said that, he bit her cheek and kissed her crazily. This girl was, of course, a bewitching potion. She could easily bewitch a man to the point that his soul was turned upside down. The more he thought about it, the more he lost control of his movements. Thus, he anxiously tore open her clothes and touched her waist that wasn't considered plump. His tongue licked and kissed her cheeks, invading her bit by bit. Their bodies were intimately pressed together, causing his body to become more and more excited. With a hiss, he sucked in a breath of cold air. His breathing gradually became heavy, and his eyes became more and more heated. Kyla, Kyla. With a tearing sound, Li Dongliang violently tore at her clothes. In the blink of an eye, her snow-white shoulders were exposed to his eyes. His large palm fiercely kneaded her waist, the corner of his mouth holding an extremely lustful smile. The man madly nibbled on her shoulder, infatuatedly murmuring, "Ching Cheng, Ching Cheng ah." Yun Shusha was completely stunned by his aggressive actions. She anxiously pushed him away, gritting her teeth as she tried to push him away. Her rationality was about to be worn out. She began to put down her pride, put down her dignity, and softly begged, I beg you to let me go." The fire in Li Dongliang's body was burning vigorously, so why would he care about her words? It was just a woman, he really didn't want to waste too much effort. There was no need to be merciful. Now that the girl of his dreams was lying under his body, how could he let her go? Chapter 1044. To put it nicely, each and every one of them was a big-name celebrity, but behind their backs, they were all groomed by others. Which of them relied on their own power to make a name for themselves? To put it bluntly, in Li Dongliang's eyes, those were all high-class prostitutes. Even if they were extremely clean and pure when they first entered the industry, after some time, how many of them were pure and untainted after entering this big dirty vat? As he thought about it, his movements became more nimble. Just like that, he pressed her firmly onto the ground and carelessly kissed her cheeks. However, he saw that her head kept turning and dodging. He did not linger and unbuckled his belt with one hand. With a swing of his other hand, he took off his pants and started to tug at her pants, intending to cut straight to the chase. Yun Shusha was so sensitive that she shuddered. Looking down, she saw that he had exposed an ugly part of himself. She almost wanted to vomit. Her last bit of rationality was completely worn out. Almost crazily, she bent her knees and hit his crotch hard. Ouch! The most vulnerable part of a man was hit hard. Li Dongliang was in so much pain that he immediately arched his back. His body tilted and he stiffly fell to the ground. Yun Shusha took a few steps back and saw that he was pointing at her with a trembling finger. His face was full of disbelief. It was as if he had never expected that this little woman would be so chaste. After a while, he spat out a few words forcefully, as if squeezing each word out from between his teeth. Damn it. Stinky B****. Yun Shusha stood up shakily. Her blood-red eyes stared at him fiercely, as if she was afraid that he would pounce on her at any time. Her face was full of vigilance. As she watched him, she retreated in the direction of the door. With one hand, she turned the doorknob, but she could not open it. She just remembered that the door was locked from the inside and needed a keycard to unlock it. Yun Shusha rushed into the living room again. The man was still lying on the ground. His body was twisted in a strange position, as if he was in extreme pain. His forehead was covered in cold sweat. As he cursed, he glared fiercely at her. The lights were a little dim. She scrambled around the living room to look for something. Behind her, Li Dongliang saw her rummaging through the cabinets as if she was looking for something. He panted and laughed. "Haha. Are you looking for this?" Yun Shusha turned her head impatiently, only to see Li Dongliang slowly take out a blue access card from his pocket. Her pupils constricted as she shouted, "Give it to me. Have you forgotten? What did I say?" Li Dongliang struggled to stand up and said word by word, "Don't even think about walking out of here tonight." After saying that, he took out a medicine bottle from his clothes. Aphrodisiac. After being frightened by her just now, they had all wilted. After all, at a certain age, one's energy was not as good as before. After taking 2 pills, Li Dongliang's face was flushed red and he was in high spirit. Damn, this woman is really hard to deal with. However, he loved this kind of tone. The harder it was to find a wild animal, the easier it was to arouse his desire to conquer it. Thinking of this, he walked closer to her step by step, just like a wild beast waiting for an opportunity to capture its prey. Yoon Shusha retreated step by step until she was forced into the dining room. From the corner of her eyes, she saw the scissors on the counter. Her fingertips started to tremble and there was a tinge of hesitation and struggle in her eyes. Chapter 1045. From this angle, Li Dongliang couldn't see clearly what she was doing and guessed that she wouldn't be able to cause any trouble. Instead, he had forced her into a corner and she had nowhere to escape. Hence, he pounced towards her. Yoon Shusha turned pale with fright as she gave a low cry and turned around, aiming the scissors at him. "Don't come over." Li Dongliang stopped in his tracks as he looked at the weapon in her hand, which was glowing with a cold light, and suddenly laughed. "Huh? Are you threatening me? Using scissors? Do you dare? Do you dare to stab me?" Li Dongliang was certain that she wouldn't dare to do such a foolish thing as he pressed on. Yoon Shusha's hands were trembling and her lips were white as she looked at him warily as she screamed, "Don't come over! Don't come over!" Li Dongliang kicked her hand. Yoon Shusha felt a pain in her wrist and the scissors fell to the ground. Li Dongliang immediately went forward and grabbed her hair and gave her a slap. "Pa!" Yoon Shusha let out a muffled groan as she stumbled and leaned against the wall. Her body slid down along the wall weakly. Li Dongliang pounced on her and grabbed her by the collar. She struggled to prop up her exhausted body and slowly raised her face. Her extremely pale face was half-stained with tears. Her pair of moving and beautiful eyes were dim and dull like agate jade covered in dust. Blood trickled from the corner of her lips. Her miserable appearance was like that of an injured animal, which could not help but arouse one's pity. Li Dongliang held her face and pinched hard with his fingernails, leaving a few dark red blood marks on her face. Yoon Shusha sucked in a breath of cold air from the pain and suddenly regained some consciousness. She opened her eyes and stared back fiercely as she gritted her teeth and said, "Li Dongliang, you bastard! Scum! Quickly let me go! Let me go! Scum! Ha! Yoon Shusha, don't you know the rules? I'm telling you clearly that I'm going to have you today." Li Dongliang waved his hand and gave her another slap. This time, he exerted a lot of force. Yoon Shusha only felt that her brain was in a mess from this slap. Her temples throbbed faintly, and tears flowed uncontrollably from her eyes. She sniffed stubbornly and tried her best to suppress her tears, but she couldn't hold them back and started sobbing softly. I beg you, let me go. I beg you." Yoon Shusha was terrified and the situation in front of her made her unable to extricate herself from it. Even such a stubborn woman had to put down all her dignity and pride as she cried and begged again and again, "Don't touch me, I beg you." Seeing her cry like this, Li Dongliang felt even more irritated. This woman was really not enlightened enough. "Do you think that kid really likes you? You must be dreaming." Li Dongliang grabbed her neck and moved closer to her face as he sneered, "You're just a plaything by his side. Do you think that he likes you? A man like Mu Yaja is so high and mighty, how can he fall in love with a woman like you? Do you think that it's so easy to enter the Mu family? Do you believe that even if I kill you, he won't even blink for you?" Chapter 1046. Yoon Shusha felt a stab of pain in her heart. She knew that Mu Yaja's status was high, his wealth was comparable to a country's, and he was also a man of striking appearance. She knew even more clearly that with her background, how could a woman like her be compared to him? However, there was still a faint trace of hope in her heart. She wanted to get closer to him at all costs, just a little bit closer. So, she wanted to become more outstanding, to become a woman who was worthy of him. That was all. She had once thought that Mu Yaja was only interested in her on a whim. Perhaps one day in the future, he would suddenly feel sick of her and lose interest in her. Then, he would coldly push her out of his world. But then she thought of how he cared for her, and how he doted on her. Although it was as beautiful as a bubble that would burst at the slightest touch, it really existed. Holding hands with him made her feel like she had the whole world. He was so important to her. Then, she would be equally important to him. Yoon Shusha's voice was hollow and broken. "I'm very important to him. He's my man, and the only man in my life." Li Dongliang narrowed his eyes dangerously, and he was furious. What could Mu Yaja give her that he couldn't give her? How could this woman be so tactless? She was already a woman in society, yet she was still so insensible and so aloof. It really made him feel disgusted. But, looking at her face, Li Dongliang's heart was stirred. This was a face that he had yearned for so many years. Every time he thought of Mu Qingcheng, whom he had pursued for so long, and then looked at this beautiful face, he couldn't help but feel an itch in his heart. The face in his mind slowly overlapped with Yun Shusha's face in front of him. Li Dongliang only felt his head heat up. His eyes were bloodshot as he held her face with both hands. As though he hadn't touched a woman for decades, he lowered his head and kissed her crazily. Yun Shusha's heart skipped a beat as she felt his hot breath and looked at his face that was just inches away from hers. Her whole body trembled violently as she clenched her fists and punched his shoulders. She screamed, "Let go of me! Let go of me! Scram! F***ck, bitch, don't be ungrateful." Li Dongliang was irritated and had nowhere to vent his lust. Seeing that this woman was resisting so fiercely, he was instantly enraged. No one liked to dilly-dally on such matters. Slow movements were the most torturous. His heart was anxious, and he grabbed the hem of her skirt. With a little strength from his wrist, he tore it open. Hearing the sound of clothes tearing, Yun Shusha was immediately scared stiff. Her hands frantically pulled at her clothes and desperately pushed him away. She cried and begged in a hoarse voice, "Scum! Li Dongliang, you scum! Damn it! Behave yourself! I don't believe that I can't handle a woman." Li Dongliang was so angry that he lost control and pushed her to the ground. He turned over and straddled her body. His hands groped her body unruly, roaring like a beast in heat. Yun Shusha cried out in pain. She only felt that this push made her back and the back of her head hit the ground. It was as if her entire soul was going to be knocked out. She gasped in pain and struggled to open her eyes. From the corner of her eye, she saw the scissors that had fallen to the side. Her face instantly turned pale. Chapter 1047. Ah! A blood-curdling scream reverberated through the huge room. The ambulance and police cars were parked by the entrance, and the sirens attracted everyone's attention. Yun Shusha sat on the sofa in the living room expressionlessly, staring blankly at her blood-stained hands. Her eyes were empty, and her shoulders were slightly trembling. A strong sense of guilt rose in her heart. Looking at her blood-stained hands, she felt that they were too dirty. So she took the towel that the manager had handed to her and wiped her hands vigorously. A group of uniformed police officers questioned a few of the villa's servants and understood the general situation. Then they walked up to her. "Excuse me, are you Yun Shusha?" Yun Shusha lifted her head sluggishly and saw a few uniformed police officers coldly sizing her up with their heads lowered. She nodded blankly and couldn't help but furrow her brows. "You're suspected of intentional assault. Come with us." She pursed her lips, lowered her eyes, put down the towel, and slowly stood up. It started raining late at night, and it got heavier and heavier. It became a downpour, and the bean-sized raindrops hit the window, making pitter-patter sounds. When Yun Shusha got out of the police car, she was drenched from head to toe. The rain hit her face and it hurt. She slowly looked up, and the cold rain fell into her eyes drop by drop. Her eyes were so bitter that they hurt, and the wound on the corner of her lips started to hurt because of the rain. Looking at the beautiful police station in front of her, she suddenly stopped. In the cold rain, her heart sank bit by bit with despair. At that moment, she suddenly felt very tired, both physically and mentally. Seeing that she was standing motionless in the rain, the auxiliary police officer reached out to push her. Yun Shusha stumbled and fell to the ground. Yun Shusha looked down blankly and slowly supported herself with her arms. Seeing that she had fallen, the auxiliary police officer couldn't help but walk over in annoyance. He sighed and helped her up, saying loudly, "I've seen people with weak bodies, but I've never seen someone as weak as you. Why did you fall with a push? Can't you stand firm? If you want to get caught in the rain, can you not drag us down with you? Don't waste time. Hurry up and go to the police station." With that, the man pushed her shoulder forward. Yun Shusha said softly, "I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't do it on purpose. Whether you did anything wrong or not, We'll have to investigate thoroughly before we know. It's not up to you to decide. Quickly go in. Let me make a phone call. Make a call. Why are you calling? Who are you calling when the interrogation hasn't started yet? Go in. After saying that, he grabbed Yoon Shusha's shoulder and pulled her in. In the police station, Yoon Shusha sat quietly on the sofa. She hugged her shoulders and shivered. Her expression was so numb that there was no expression on her face. She looked like a lifeless puppet. Mo Chengan walked over with a notebook and a pen. He placed a cup of hot tea in front of her and turned to sit down at the table. He was the captain of the police force and the person in charge of this case. Yoon Shusha glanced at him. Chapter 1048. Seeing her looking at him up and down with eyes full of doubt, Mo Chengan smiled and raised his head to look at her. Yoon Shusha was startled and unnaturally withdrew her gaze. With his status, he had come into contact with all kinds of women. There was no lack of flirtatious women, pure and cute women, and even sexy and charming women. But he really didn't know how to define the girl in front of him. In terms of cuteness, she had a very sexy figure. Her eyebrows were arrogant and her eyes were narrow and flirtatious. They were very charming, but there was a pure and innocent look in her eyes. She sat quietly on the sofa with a white blanket draped over her. Her whole body was wet, and her seaweed-like hair was soaked. She was in a sorry state. Her right cheek was red and swollen, and the corner of her lips was bleeding. There were some bruises on her slightly exposed shoulder, and her clothes were disheveled. There was a tear on her collar, and it looked like she had been raped. He roughly understood the situation from the servants in the villa. He also learned that this girl seemed to be a newcomer in the entertainment industry. He didn't pay attention to the entertainment industry, so he naturally didn't know who she was. She was the one who called the police, so it could be considered a surrender. He learned from the servants that this girl was dragged all the way to the villa by Li Dongliang. At that time, she seemed to be unwilling. Not long after, she ran downstairs with hands full of blood to call the police. The unspoken rules of the entertainment industry? That was his guess. In the entertainment industry, sending women to sleep with producers, big bosses, or investors was a common thing. In this day and age, if a newcomer didn't have anyone to support her, she could only rely on explosive scandals and gimmicks to fight for her position. Most of the girls who just entered the industry weren't famous. In this kind of situation, naturally, no management company was willing to take the risk to invest in packaging her. Of course, if you were willing to pay a price in exchange, then it was a different story. He had encountered this kind of situation before, but most of it was consensual. A few years ago, a small model rushed to the police station to report a case. She accused a famous investor of raping her and asked the police to open a case. This case was handled by another colleague of his. Of course, there was nothing wrong with that. Later, due to pressure from certain parties, this matter was quickly suppressed and left unsettled. As for the unknown model, she was later promoted to a first-tier female artist. Now, her career was in full swing and she was very popular. In this kind of materialistic era, how could a small commoner fight against those with power and status? Seeing him looking at her without restraint, Yoon Shusha looked down uncomfortably. Her delicate and beautiful face couldn't hide her tiredness. She slowly held the teacup, and the warm tea drove some of the chill. She took a sip, but the bitter taste of the tea, of course. Yoon Shusha pursed her lips. She had never tasted tea leaves before, so she was not used to its taste. Mo Chengan looked at her again and asked, "You don't look like an adult. How old are you?" Chapter 1049. What's wrong? Seeing that she didn't say a word, Mo Chengan glanced at her and smiled faintly. Are you so nervous that you forgot how old you are? Don't be afraid. This is the police station, not a wolf's den. Yoon Shusha licked her dry lips and answered slowly, 24 years old. Mo Chengan was startled. I really couldn't tell. I thought you were a student. Yoon Shusha was embarrassed. Even though Mo Chengan was trying to ease the tense atmosphere, Yoon Shusha's face was still stiff. Come on, tell me what happened and what happened. She lowered her head and was silent for a while. Then, she suddenly opened her mouth and told him everything that happened after she entered the room. During the process, Mo Chengan listened and took notes at the same time. From time to time, he would raise his head to look at her face. Surprisingly, there was no sign of panic or fear on her face. On the contrary, compared to her expression when she first stepped into the station, her face was very calm. He had to admit that this was a beautiful girl. At that moment, she lowered her head and calmly narrated. Her eyes were slightly closed, and her thick eyelashes were long and curly. When she spoke, she trembled slightly. It was really pitiful. Her two beautiful collarbones were like jade, rising and falling as she breathed. Just by looking at her, just the opening and closing of those red lips made her infatuated with them. He was secretly criticizing Li Dongliang in his heart. Why did he want to get this girl by hook or by crook? This girl did have the capital to make people go through so much trouble. Yun Shusha did not notice the unreadable look in his eyes as she continued to confess. Mo Chengan also reined in his wandering thoughts and listened attentively. However, the more he listened, the more his brows furrowed. If his first impression of her was that she was beautiful, his second impression was that she was arrogant, and his third impression was that she was passionate. This kind of girl, in this kind of era, would either fall and bleed in a hypocritical society or easily offend people she shouldn't. Naturally, she was the latter. It wasn't that he didn't have any sympathy for her. However, compared to sympathy, he felt more pity. After she finished telling him what had happened, Mo Chengan checked the records with her and circled a few places that she had missed. After modifying it, he asked her to put her fingerprints one by one. Mo Chengan lowered his head and began to write a summary of the case. As he wrote, he said faintly, "Your name is Yun Shusha, right?" She nodded. "Yes. You're such a silly girl. You've really made a big mess out of this. Li Dongliang is not someone you can afford to offend." Yun Shusha said nonchalantly, "Indeed, I was in the wrong. I was the one who hurt someone, so even if you want to detain me, arrest me, or convict me, I have nothing to say. But, this should be legitimate self-defense. But that man was suspected of rape and molestation first. According to the law, that Li Dongliang should also be punished. According to the law, she could request to be judged as legitimate self-defense." Mo Chengan shook his head helplessly. He raised his head to look into her eyes and asked in a low voice, "Do you think the rules of this society can be explained with simple words?" Yun Shusha was stunned. She looked up in disbelief and frowned at him. Chapter 1050. Mo Chengan looked at her calmly and said in a low voice, "Do you know who you've offended? Yun Shusha, let me tell you what's going to happen next so that you can be mentally prepared." After a pause, he leaned closer to her and said in a low voice, "Soon, the phone on the police station's desk will ring. The man who's calling is a high-ranking official. He has a good relationship with Li Dongliang and is in a high position. First, he'll inform the chief that I'm no longer in charge of this case. Then, you'll be detained for 24 hours. During this long period of time, many unexpected things will happen. Then, someone will take my place to try this case. What does this mean? It means that you no longer have the right to speak as a citizen. This is a simple physical conflict case with no justifiable defense. This case may become a serious and vicious criminal case. It's undeniable that your crime will be aggravated. The reason for your conviction will be unimaginable, but no one will dare to question the authenticity of this reason. Of course, no one will question your rights. To put it bluntly, you'll be forced to confess under torture. Then, you'll go to court to be tried and sentenced. It may be a few decades or even life. If you're lucky, you'll spend the rest of your life in prison. But do you know? In prison, too many unknown things happen. Some people even go to prison and never see the sun rise again. Reality is so cruel." After that, he leaned back in his chair. His face was calm as he picked up the teacup on the table and took a sip. Yun Shusha's face was ghastly pale. "Why? Why did it become like this? I was just defending myself." She had only hurt someone out of self-defense, but she was sentenced to such a heavy sentence. Mo Chengan laughed. "Isn't this world like this? The weak are prey to the strong. The weak are always bullied." Yun Shusha looked at him absent-mindedly. She felt that the so-called rules of the game in this world were so unbelievable. In other words, maybe Li Dongliang would use his personal connections to send her to hell and never make a comeback. Mo Chengan put down his teacup and helplessly sighed. I'm really sorry. Although I really want to help you, there's nothing I can do in this matter. Yun Shusha lowered her head and fell silent. If what you said is true, can you do me a favor? Mo Chengan frowned. What is it? Yun Shusha took the pen and wrote a string of numbers on his palm. Tell him I'm here. Please. Yun Shusha pursed her lips and looked at him. Mo Chengan calmly retracted his hand and clenched his fist. Not long after, the phone on the table rang. The sudden ringing woke her up from her reverie. Her shoulders trembled as she looked at the phone with a pale face. The bureau chief patted his stomach and stood up. He walked to the table and picked up the phone. His expression immediately became respectful, and he answered one by one with a smile. Mo Chengan's face was expressionless as he crossed his arms over his chest. There was a hint of depression between his brows. Chapter 1051. What happened next was just as Mo Chengan had said. Not only was he transferred from the case, but she was also detained by the police. The moment she stepped through the door, she really began to feel at a loss, because she didn't know what was waiting for her after 24 hours. CEO Lee, calm down, calm down. It's not a big deal to be angry, but it will hurt your health. Don't make things difficult for yourself because of a little girl. Here, I sincerely apologize to you on her behalf. Apologize? Is an apology useful? Even if that girl kneels at my feet and begs me to let her go, it won't help. Sun Hua, I'm telling you, I'm not done with you. How can you do this? In the hospital ward, the atmosphere was as cold as ice. Li Dongliang was lying on the bed with a frosty expression. His eyelids were heavy as he leaned against the headboard without looking at anyone. Sun Hua, on the other hand, did not have a way out. He could only brace himself and stand by the bed, bowing and groveling. His face was already alternating between green and white. While he could not help feeling annoyed with Yun Shusha, he still had to put on an apologetic smile for Li Dongliang. How could he have known that such a big thing would happen? He originally thought that no matter how unwilling Yun Shusha was, she was at most an unruly kitten. Once she sharpened her claws and taught her a lesson, she would naturally be obedient. However, he didn't know that not long after he left, this chaste girl stabbed the big boss with a pair of scissors. Look at that. Damn it. The wound wasn't shallow. If it was anyone else, their heart would be burning with rage. He raised his head and stole a glance at Li Dongliang's gloomy face. His back started to break out in cold sweat. He thought to himself, if I had known, I wouldn't have tried so hard to send this girl here. A strong woman like Yun Shusha should be sent to the mafia boss for a good lesson. No matter how hard a bone was, it could be tamed. But now, she had offended this big shot in front of him. Li Dongliang, who was he? Who in the capital didn't know this man? Although he was the boss of an entertainment company in name, he had connections behind the scenes. In the early years, this Li Dongliang was not very mature. However, when the company was just established, he had many bad ideas. How did Universal Pictures come to be? Wasn't it all because of some high-ranking officials, the heads of the government, and the leaders of the underworld? Was there even a need to ask why they were willing to support worldwide? Those big shots didn't lack gold or treasures. They just lacked a beauty by their side to have some fun. Thus, during those years, Li Dongliang sent many of the beautiful ladies in the company to them and kept them as mistresses. With such a connection, if they were happy, they would naturally be willing to share a piece of the pie and be willing to open up a path for your company. Therefore, Li Dongliang, whether it was in the legal world or in the underworld, as long as he had some power, he would have some connections, not to mention those who were inextricably linked to him in the dark. In the capital, he was a big shot who could do whatever he wanted. Anyone who saw him would have to give him some face. Now, could Yun Shusha still hope that there would be a way out? Chapter 1052. Regardless of anything else, just the relationship between Li Dongliang and a certain high-ranking official in the capital was enough to suppress her. Not to mention the day of a comeback, it would be a blessing if he was not implicated. Now, it was already difficult for him to think about how to protect himself. How could he still have the time to think about that girl's safety? Damn it, she deserved to die. How could she be so unruly and ungrateful? Thinking about other artistes, they were quite well behaved. Why was it that when it came to him, he had to deal with such a person? He really could not figure it out. In the midst of a myriad of thoughts, he felt helpless, indignant, worried, but more than that, he felt fear and uneasiness. Li Dongliang glanced at him expressionlessly and sneered, "Why are you still standing here? Do you still think I didn't make myself clear? Get lost, don't be an eyesore." Sun Hua gritted his teeth. How could he leave? He had not made things clear yet. He was afraid that he would find trouble with him later. He was still counting on Li Dongliang to make a living. He could not fall in front of this girl. He lowered his voice and said, "Boss Li, I'm really sorry. I didn't expect Yun Shusha to be so unruly, and I didn't expect such a thing to happen." Li Dongliang glared at him fiercely and sneered, "Sun Hua, I don't want to waste my breath. Don't create any more trouble for me. Didn't I ask you to settle the matter properly? Ah, you're just a small singer. Why didn't you learn how to read people's expressions for a living? What's wrong? Do you really think you're Du Shenyang?" Being glared at by his sharp gaze, he almost knelt down. Sun Hua felt wronged and was at a loss for words. He felt like he had bitten a mouthful of bitter and astringent coptis. "Boss Li, I'll kneel down to you, okay? I'll let you deal with this girl, but please let me go. Otherwise, I'll be so wronged. Next time. I'll definitely find you an obedient woman next time." "There's a next time. This time, she stabbed me in the waist. Next time, you'll send me someone more vicious than Yun Shusha. Won't she stab my family jewels? Are you trying to give me bad luck on purpose?" Li Dongliang snorted coldly, obviously not falling for his trick. He turned his head and shouted angrily at him, "Do you think I'm interested in your tricks? Bah! Sun Hua, get lost as far as you can. You were the one who sent this person to me. Now that something has happened, do you think you can just pat your butt and say that everything is fine? In your King dreams, do you want me to try stabbing you?" Sun Hua's face immediately turned deathly pale. His shoulders trembled, and he couldn't spit out a single word. He thought to himself, this time, it's really over. Wasn't it enough that this B*TCH had harmed him? Did she want to drag him down with her? If Li Dongliang were to slap him, would he still be able to survive? "Why are you standing here?" Li Dongliang saw him standing there with a bitter face and felt even more irritated. He stretched out his leg and wanted to kick him hard. However, it was fine if he didn't move. Once he moved his leg, perhaps it was too much of a commotion. In his agitation, he accidentally pulled on his wound. Li Dongliang's body twitched, and he grimaced in pain. He couldn't help but curse in a low voice. He rolled his eyes and saw that Sun Hua was still there. His expression became even uglier. Still not getting lost. Damn it. Chapter 1053. He nodded repeatedly and responded a few times. Then, he turned around and bowed as he left the room. The door of the ward was carefully closed. Li Dongliang was still angry. He kicked the blanket in frustration, but his face turned pale from the pain. In his heart, he was clamoring. He would definitely not forgive this untactful girl. After leaving the hospital, Sun Hua was extremely frustrated. He pulled his hair and gritted his teeth as he cursed. This Yun Shusha was so daring. She even used scissors to stab people. He really didn't understand how Huanyu trained their artist. Now, was he trying to steal a chicken only to end up losing the rice used to lure it? Originally, he wanted to go to the police station to see Yun Shusha, who had gotten into big trouble. However, after being scolded by Li Dongliang in the ward, he was no longer in the mood to go to the police station. When he thought about offending someone like Li Dongliang, he was so anxious that he stomped his feet. He was at a loss for what to do. Now, even he couldn't protect himself. When that old man was released from the hospital, he might come up with some dirty tricks to deal with him. Thus, a strong hatred for Yun Shusha grew in his heart. When his assistant called to ask if he should go to the police station to think of a way to bail Yun Shusha out, Sun Hua stood on the street with his hands on his waist and shouted angrily, "Why do you care about that girl? Not only did she want to jump into the fire pit, She even dragged us down with her. I really don't understand. We can't even take care of ourselves now. Why do we care about her? Let her fend for herself. Damn it. The assistant answered submissively and hung up the phone. Sun Hua was obviously confused from anger. After hanging up the phone, he felt that his head was hot and dizzy. He was still angry and called Kong Xiaoqian, but the phone was busy. Sun Hua didn't think much of it. He took a taxi home and went to bed. On the other hand, although it was a procedural detention, Mo Chengan had more or less helped the poor girl. He used his connections to arrange a relatively clean detention room for her. Locked up with her were a few street girls who had just been caught from the red light district. In the detention room, Yun Shusha leaned against the wall. She tilted her head and looked at this strange world through the iron bars. At this moment, the few female prisoners who were locked in the same cell as her were sizing her up with strange gazes. Hey, look. It was a new girl. Ayo, look, he's not bad looking. Sure, don't let others hear you. She's looking over. A femme fatale's face, dressed so coquettishly, how immoral. In my opinion, maybe they were also caught from the red light district. These days, the red light district is very strict. Don't talk about it. Maybe she's not a young lady. Yun Shusha did not hear their discussion. She lowered her head, looked around, and slowly walked to a corner and sat down. Both of her hands were handcuffed tightly. She raised her hands and looked at the swaying chains. Her eyes darkened bit by bit. There was no light in the entire single cell. There was only a dim incandescent lamp in the corridor. It seemed to have been in disrepair for a long time. Half of the lights were dim. She laid down on the bed, and as soon as her head touched the bedding, her face turned ashen from the unpleasant musty smell. Yun Shusha quickly sat up and leaned against the wall. Chapter 1054. She leaned her head weakly against the cold wall. She squinted her eyes and felt a little sleepy. Look, it's the newcomer. Hey. 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 TSK. We're talking to you. Hey. Hey. Newcomer. Just as she closed her eyes, a few voices were heard. Someone pushed Yun Shusha's shoulder. She looked up expressionlessly. Beside her, a few women sat down around her. Hey. What's your name? What did you do to get in here? Yun Shusha frowned but did not answer. Hey. We're asking you a question. Why don't you say anything? Young lady, you're quite pretty. Where did you come from? Yun Shusha pursed her lips but still did not say anything. The female prisoners felt bored and looked at each other. When they looked at Yun Shusha again, their eyes were filled with contempt. I didn't expect this young lady to act so high and mighty. I think she's that kind of woman. Hey, you guys don't know. Hey, what kind of crime did you commit? Were you also caught by the anti-prostitution brigade? Yun Shusha said impatiently, I killed someone and turned myself in. The detention room suddenly became silent. Everyone did not believe her at first, but when they saw the bloodstains on her hands that she had yet to wipe clean, a few of them suddenly showed fear and hid far away from her. They lowered their voices and started to whisper. What a murderer, she looks young and pretty, but I didn't expect her to be so vicious. Yun Shusha was not in the mood to listen to what they were talking about. She just looked up at the grey cement ceiling indifferently. Sleepiness came over her unknowingly. Amidst the gossip, she looked down tiredly and fell asleep in the blink of an eye. She did not have a good sleep. Her back was really painful, especially her shoulder, which felt like it was stiff. When he woke up, it was amidst the police officer's shouts and the clanking of metal. She opened her eyes in a daze and saw two men in police uniforms standing in front of the door. They were holding a bunch of keys and knocking on the iron bars. They looked down at her and said coldly, Hey, wake up. Yun Shusha slowly sat up and rubbed her stiff and painful shoulders. She frowned suspiciously and asked, What's wrong? What's the matter? The police officer opened the iron door and yawned. He leaned against the door and waved his hand impatiently. Come out and follow us. Yun Shusha felt a little uneasy at the inexplicable order. Even so, she still obeyed the order. She stood up and followed behind them. With doubts, she asked, Where are you taking me? Just follow us, don't talk so much nonsense. The attitude of the two police officers was very cold. Thinking about it, They were originally dozing off when they received the order to bring this girl to the chief's office. Now that they were not awake, their mood was burning with anger. As for what happened next, it was simply a fantasy story. What was waiting for her was not punishment or other things, but unexpected freedom. Someone bailed her out with a large sum of money. However, the director didn't dare to accept the huge sum of money sent by this person. Just the name above was enough to make him breathless. In his heart, he thought that even if he offended Li Dongliang, he would let Yun Shusha go. He really could not afford to offend that person. Chapter 1055. The night was quiet, and the neon lights dimmed. After leaving the police station, in the rain, Yun Shusha was politely escorted to a Lincoln limousine by the chief. Even the umbrella was personally fetched for her by the chief, who had braved the rain to get it for her. She couldn't believe that the smiling man in front of her was the same person as the bureau chief who had been cold and indifferent to her earlier. Minute-Yu was standing in front of the car with an umbrella and a smile. He was dressed in a well-ironed business suit, which made him look very classy. However, when Yun Shusha was escorted to him by the bureau chief, Minute-Yu couldn't bring himself to smile when he saw her haggard face and miserable appearance. "Miss Yun, are you okay?" Minute-Yu asked with concern. "Did you suffer in the police station?" "How could that be?" "Oh, how could we let Miss Yun suffer?" The bureau chief smiled awkwardly as he tried to smooth things over. Minute-Yu ignored him and leaned over to open the back door for Yun Shusha. At the same time, he said to the bureau chief, "Bureau Chief Chen, sorry to trouble you with this." Hearing this, the old bureau chief was really in fear and trepidation. He leaned closer to Minute-Yu and said softly, "Oh, it's nothing. It's just a small matter. It's my fault for being so magnanimous. I'm indebted to Chairman Mu for taking care of me all this time. I should be the one thanking you." Minute-Yu smiled and then frowned slightly. "As for Chairman Li, don't worry. I'll take care of this matter. No matter what Chairman Li does, hey." The old bureau chief chuckled and deliberately lowered his voice. He has to take into account young Master Mu's status, right? He was absolutely right about this. Even though Li Dongliang was a big shot in the capital, he was still lacking compared to Mu Yaja. Minute-Yu nodded and smiled. "That's good." The old police chief glanced at Yun Shusha. Thinking of how he had locked her up in jail for a few hours, he began to feel uneasy. He turned to her and said humbly, "Miss Yun Shusha, I'm sorry that I didn't recognize you before. You're a person of great moral stature, so please don't hold a grudge against me. Please don't take my previous offense to heart." Yun Shusha furrowed her brows indifferently. Ignoring him, she got into the car without consulting him. The old bureau chief watched as the car started and drove away. It was a little cold in the car. Minute-Yu saw Yun Shusha's shoulders hunched. He was afraid that she would catch a cold, so he turned to ask the chauffeur to turn on the heater. Yun Shusha stared fixedly at him. Her face was expressionless, but there was a hint of wariness and vigilance in her eyes. "Who are you?" She didn't seem to know this man. She didn't have any impression of him. Minute-Yu didn't know whether to laugh or cry when he saw her looking at him cautiously and suspiciously. He immediately explained, "I'm Chairman Mu's personal assistant. We should have met that day in Chairman Mu's office." Minute-Yu saw that she was still wary and said patiently, "Don't you remember? Just a few days ago, you were in the chairman's office." His smile was full of sincerity and gave her a great sense of calmness. However, he saw that her shoulders were moving up and down slightly. She seemed to be still in shock and was panting heavily. Minute-Yu held her shoulders and said, "Don't be nervous. It's all in the past. It's okay. I work for Chairman Mu. I'm not a bad person." Chapter 1056. Was it Mu Yaja who bailed me out? Yes. Yun Shusha was really frightened tonight. She was like a bird startled by the twang of a bow, trembling in fear. I don't have to go to jail anymore. Miss Yun, don't worry. Boss will arrange everything, he answered calmly. Then, where is he? Why didn't he come? You know, with boss's identity, it's not convenient for him to show up. I'll send you home now. Boss is waiting for you at home. Yun Shusha pursed her lips and nodded. After a night of twists and turns, she was in a sorry state. Her clothes were disheveled, and the hem of her clothes and cuffs were stained with hideous bloodstains. Now, they were a little black. Sitting in the car, she quickly couldn't resist the fatigue and fell asleep. The car drove into Yunshan. Shusha sleepily felt herself being pulled into a warm embrace. Her eyelids were very heavy, and she couldn't open them for a while. At this moment, the sky was already bright. When Mu Yaja carried Shusha into the bedroom, he couldn't even feel the weight of the person in his arms. She was too light. She was so thin that he couldn't even hold her waist. Her heart ached a little. He didn't even dare to use too much strength. He felt that if he wasn't careful, he would break the bones of the person in his arms. Mu Yaja placed her on the bed and turned on the wall lamp. He looked at the woman who was curled up into a ball, only to see that her clothes were tattered and torn into thousands of rags. It was obvious that someone had torn them apart. Mu Yaja searched her body and saw that there were countless strangulation marks and bruises on her body. How could this woman get hurt so easily? Mu Yaja's dark eyes searched her body over and over again. Suddenly, he caught a glimpse of the bloodstains on her hand that had not been wiped clean. His face turned cold, and he immediately grabbed her hand nervously to examine it carefully. After a careful examination, there were no wounds on her body. The bloodstains on her hands shouldn't be hers. His wrists were scarred by handcuffs. The red marks were very eye-catching. He was still worried and carefully checked her body, but his gaze suddenly fell on the kiss mark on her shoulder. Although it was called a hickey, it was more like a mark left by someone who had fiercely bitten him. His gaze instantly turned gloomy, and a chill shot out from the depths of his eyes, as if he wanted to freeze the entire world. There was no need to think about what she had gone through. According to Minute Yu, she used a pair of scissors to stab someone. Later, she called the police and was arrested on suspicion of intentional injury. She was not brave enough to hurt others. She had always been a gentle person. No matter what happened, she would never easily hurt others. However, what kind of desperate situation was she in that she didn't even hesitate to hurt someone? Most likely, he had been forced to the point where he had nowhere else to go. That was why he had done this. According to Minute Yu's report, Li Dongliang's side was unable to restrain their anger and was preparing to falsely accuse her of intentional homicide. All the servants in the villa would provide conclusive testimony as witnesses. However, according to the law, what she had done was only justified self-defense. It was obvious that Li Dongliang wanted her dead. Damn it. Chapter 1057. Shusha opened her eyes in the darkness. In her hazy vision, she saw a tall and white figure beside her. It was so dark that it blocked all the light. She tried her best to open her eyes, but she couldn't see who the person in front of her was. She could only vaguely tell that the man in front of her was emitting a sharp aura. Now, she couldn't help but feel a little jittery and paranoid. She felt the murderous aura from the man, and her body quivered as she suddenly became clear-headed. She let out a cry of surprise and abruptly shrank back. The man leaned forward slightly and scooped her up with his long arms. She fell into a familiar and warm embrace. "Don't be afraid. It's me." Mu Yaja's gentle and mellow voice sounded above her head. Following that, a familiar fragrance wafted into her nose. It was the unique fragrance of his body, and it made her feel extremely at ease. The moment she heard his deep voice, Shusha realized that she had returned home and was safe. She snuggled into his broad and warm embrace and wrapped her arms around his waist. At this moment, her heart, which had been restless all this while, finally settled down. At that moment, there were too many grievances that she wanted to tell him, but she didn't know where to start. However, her tears were the first to flow out. Shusha tried her best to hold it in, but when she tried to open her mouth, her throat was choked with sobs. Mu Yaja, her voice was hoarse and trembling. At that moment, she seemed to be in a state of shock as her entire body was trembling. I'm here." He gave her such a firm response that he couldn't help but hug her trembling body even tighter. "Mu Yaja. You. Why did you only come now?" Mu Yaja was stunned. "I waited for you for so long. Why did you only appear now?" It sounded like she was complaining and questioning him. In her world, she saw him as a god, an omnipotent figure. Why did he only appear now? Why did he appear so late? When she was so helpless, why didn't he appear earlier? Mu Yaja clenched his fists and hugged her even tighter. Her words were like a sharp blade that tore open a bloody wound in his heart, causing him to feel a sharp pain. Mu Yaja lowered his eyes and hid the love and tenderness in his eyes. He planted a kiss between her eyebrows. Sorry, I'm late. His deep and magnetic voice rang forcefully in her ears. Yoon Shusha's lips trembled. She couldn't hold back her tears any longer and burst out. The grievances and humiliation that she had suffered, as well as the fear and terror that she had experienced, all gathered in her tears and rolled down. Mu Yaja kissed her gently to soothe her. He grabbed her fair jade-like chin and pressed his thin lips against the corner of her eyes, kissing away her bitter tears. He kissed her eyebrows, the tip of her nose, her cheeks, and finally kissed her lips. Under his patient coaxing, Yoon Shusha calmed down a little. Her tense body also relaxed a little. However, she still had lingering fears, and the fear in her heart couldn't completely dissipate. Tonight's scene must have left an indelible nightmare in her heart. Thinking of this, Mu Yaja couldn't suppress his anger anymore. There was only one thought in his mind. Who on earth had such guts to do this? The woman that he couldn't bear to bully was actually bullied to this extent. Chapter 1058. Who was it that dared to bully his woman like this? They deserved to die. Mu Yaja frowned coldly. If Yoon Shusha were to look up at this moment, she would definitely be frightened by his icy gaze. Those close to him, on the other hand, knew that he was truly enraged. Yoon Shusha rubbed her eyes. Her eyelids felt extremely heavy. Mu Yaja lowered his head and asked, "Are you tired?" "Yes." She nodded. He said, "Then go take a shower, okay? Change into a clean set of clothes and get some sleep." Yoon Shusha pursed her lips and nodded gently. Thus, he got up and carried her in his arms. He walked into the bathroom and placed her in the bathtub. The bathtub was already filled with water. He had already ordered someone to prepare it in advance. The temperature of the water was just right. It was neither too cold nor too hot. Yoon Shusha sank into the water. The refreshing temperature quickly enveloped her. Mu Yaja wanted to bathe for her. However, Yoon Shusha smiled and said, I'll do it myself." "You'll do it yourself?" He raised his eyebrows and seemed to be worried. Yoon Shusha smiled and said, "I'll do it myself." Mu Yaja nodded and walked out of the bathroom. The first thing he did after walking out of the bathroom was to call Minute Yu on his cell phone. Minute Yu immediately reported to him, "Boss, Lee Dongliang is in the hospital now. I've already sent someone to keep an eye on him." "Okay. Keep an eye on him." Also, in the hotel suite, Minute Yu glanced at the father and daughter of the Kong Corporation sitting on the sofa. He held the phone and reported in a low voice, "Mr. Kong and Miss Kong of the Kong Corporation are here to visit you. They're already waiting for you. Let them wait. I have something to ask them." "Okay, I'll pass on the message." Mu Yaja hung up the phone, his handsome eyes narrowing in a calm and unruffled manner. Kong Chixian, Kong Xiaoqian, these two came at the right time. I have a debt to settle with them. He slowly walked to the window, took out a cigarette from the pack, lit it, and slowly took a deep puff. A puff of smoke went down his throat and into his lungs. However, even with such a thick smoke, it was difficult to brush away the annoyance in his heart. All this time, there had never been a matter that could make him so anxious and uneasy, lose his sense of propriety, and lose his composure. However, at this moment, he had no choice but to force himself to remain calm. At the very least, he had to pretend to be calm in front of her. Otherwise, she would feel uneasy and nervous. The most important thing right now was to appease her emotions. After she calmed down and fell asleep, he would have the time to slowly settle this debt. In the bathroom, Yoon Shusha soaked her body with water. Then, she picked up the shower ball, squeezed out some shower gel, and began to carefully wipe her body. However, when she saw the ghastly bloody scars all over her body, countless, densely packed wounds were scattered all over her body. Especially on her fair and flawless skin, they were extremely eye-catching. When she saw the bruises all over her body, her eyes were like a revolving lantern. The scenes of Lee Dongliang's violence against her kept flashing before her eyes. Oh my God, So dirty. So dirty. Yoon Shusha felt a sense of irritation. She frowned and impatiently turned on the shower head. The water splashed on her body, and the warmth washed over her body. She hugged her shoulders and slowly opened her eyes, allowing the water to drip down her eyelashes. Chapter 1059. Yoon Shusha resisted the urge to be disgusted and scrubbed her body vigorously with the bath ball. Her skin was extremely sensitive. Even a light pinch would leave a deep red mark. Now, she was scrubbing with all her might, as if she couldn't wait to rub off a layer of skin. Her body was scrubbed with glaring bloodstains, mottled and ragged. Looking from afar, it was truly a ghastly sight. In her mind, countless noises echoed in her ears. Ha ha ha. Fine. Even if you're Mu Yaja's woman, I'll treat you as his woman. Today, I'll have a good taste of Mu Yaja's woman. You're just a plaything by his side. Do you think he likes you? A man like Mu Yaja is high and mighty. How can he fall in love with a woman like you? Do you think it's so easy to step into the Mu family? Believe it or not, even if I kill you, he won't even blink for you. Damn it. You don't know what's good for you. If you can do it for other men, why can't you do it for me? Are you looking down on me? Yoon Shusha's breath suddenly quickened. She closed her eyes tightly, but it was as if Lee Dongliang's hideous and ugly face was reflected in her eyes. You're just an actress. What dignity do you have for an actress? Dirty, really dirty. Yoon Shusha looked at the scattered hickeys, pinch marks, and those bruises. Just looking at those unsightly marks was enough to forcibly stuff those nightmarish scenes into her mind. Yoon Shusha, be with me. Whether it's a villa or a luxury car, I'll let you have whatever you want. I want you, I want you. Yoon Shusha clenched her teeth so hard that it was as if she wanted to crush them. The nightmarish scenes in her mind were getting more and more chaotic. She finally broke down. She desperately covered her ears and screamed crazily, shut up. Shut up, shut up, shut up. Don't say any more. I don't want to. I don't want that. Mu Yaja stood in front of the window, but vaguely heard the screams coming from the bathroom. He was shocked and quickly rushed into the bathroom. However, the scene in front of him caused his eyes to hurt. His heart was throbbing with pain. He saw Yoon Shusha sitting in the bathtub. Her body had been rubbed so hard that it was red. Streaks of blood-red marks appeared as if they were filled with blood. The places that were ravaged hard actually had dense blood spots. It was a shocking sight. She covered her ears with all her might, her face twisted with struggle. Then, she suddenly opened her blood-red eyes and began to rub her body even harder as if she had gone mad. The water stains on his body had long since dried. Without the lubrication of the water, a swollen, blood-red mark was left on his body. Mu Yaja rushed over and grabbed her wrist tightly to stop her. What are you doing? Are you crazy? I want to scrub it clean. I want to scrub those filthy things off my body. But I feel that I can't scrub it clean. It's so dirty. Sob sob sob. So dirty. Yoon Shusha broke down and choked with sobs. Her eyes could not stop rolling. Chapter 1060. But it's so dirty. So dirty. What should I do? Yoon Shusha stared at him helplessly. I feel like I can't wash it clean. It's so dirty. Where is it dirty? Here, here, and here. Yoon Shusha pointed at the red marks on her shoulder and then at her neck where Lee Dongliang had kissed her. Here, here, it's all so dirty. As Yoon Shusha spoke, she wanted to break free from his grip and try to wash it clean again. Mu Yaja stopped her harshly, not allowing her to torture herself again. Stop rubbing. It's not dirty. As he said that, he suddenly leaned forward and pressed his thin lips on her shoulder. Like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water, he lightly dotted it a few times, as if he was marking something. It's not dirty anymore, okay? Yoon Shusha was stunned. Mu Yaja gently kissed her neck again. Bit by bit, he carefully kissed the area she had pointed out. It was as if he wanted to use his breath to cover the so-called filth that she had mentioned. It's not dirty here either. As he spoke, he kissed the red mark on her collarbone. Be good, okay? Yoon Shusha was stunned. She sucked in a deep breath of cold air and slowly hugged his shoulders. Her emotions gradually calmed down because of his gentle coaxing. Mu Yaja took the shower ball from her hands and threw it aside. He took the towel and carefully wiped her body. Yoon Shusha was a little embarrassed and immediately wanted to take the towel from him. "Let me do it." Mu Yaja suddenly held her raised hand. He lowered his head and kissed her palm gently. "Don't move. Be good." A warm feeling traveled from her fingertips to her heart, as if injecting warmth into her cold heart. Yoon Shusha's expression softened. She stopped struggling and allowed him to carefully wipe her body. His movements were extremely gentle, as though he was afraid that he would hurt her. His movements were extremely light. Yoon Shusha's shoulders trembled slightly. Because of his touch, her body became extremely sensitive. She hugged her knees and lowered her head, making it difficult to see the expression on her face. Mu Yaja couldn't help but ask, "What are you thinking about?" Mu Yaja. Yoon Shusha slowly frowned. She wanted to say something but stopped herself. Mu Yaja smiled and kissed the side of her ear, comforting her, "Don't think too much, be good." "What if you came a little later?" A trace of pain appeared in his eyes. She slowly placed her hand on the back of his hand. If I'm defiled by another man," Mu Yaja furrowed his brows and immediately interrupted her wild thoughts. "I won't let that happen." After a pause, he stared at her and pursed his lips. "I will protect you." Yoon Shusha was stunned. However, in a certain aspect, she was extremely stubborn. Therefore, she still asked stubbornly, "What if it happens one day?" It was as if she was eager to find an answer. Yoon Shusha stared at him, wanting to get an answer from him. Mu Yaja's thin lips moved slightly and said, "If it really happens one day." Yoon Shusha suddenly couldn't help but feel nervous. She stared at him, unwilling to let go of any expression on his face. She was so nervous that she felt a little suffocated. Chapter 1061. Remember, I'm your man. So, I'll do my duty as a man. After a pause, he added, "No matter what happens. No matter what the consequences were. As a man, he would take responsibility until the end." Yoon Shusha's heart skipped a beat. Because of this reassuring answer, a gentle smile finally appeared on her pale face. Even the corners of her lips couldn't help but curl up. "Woman, you have to remember." Mu Yaja turned her shoulders and moved closer to her face. The tips of their noses touched and their breaths touched. The corners of his lips curled up gently. "I'm very possessive, but the one I care about the most is you." Yoon Shusha looked at him. "The only one I care about is you." All along, he had been the supreme ruler of the Mu Empire. However, even though he had such a magnificent empire, he couldn't protect her. So, everything had lost its meaning. Yoon Shusha was stunned. Tears welled up in her eyes. Her heart was deeply touched. Hearing such words from his mouth was even more touching than those pretentious words of love. Mu Yaja was helpless. He reached out and covered her eyes. Warm tears soaked his palm. He intimately rubbed the tip of her nose and said unhappily, "It's rare for me to say such emotional words. If you cry, I'll feel defeated." Yoon Shusha didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It was already an hour later when they finished showering. He carried her to the chair and wiped her body. Then, he took a big and soft towel and wiped her wet hair. Yoon Shusha allowed him to serve her however he wanted. She even felt that she was like a child in his hands, and he was like a father who worried about every little thing, no matter how big or small. This man was quite strange. Sometimes, he was as childish as a child. He was willful, overbearing, and stubborn. Sometimes, he was like a warm father. People couldn't help but yearn for him. Yoon Shusha raised her head to look at him, just in time to see his proud chin. His handsome face was flawless from all angles. Even if one were to look up from the bottom, under such a death angle, he was still so exquisite and perfect. Her lips curled up as she suddenly grabbed his collar and pulled him towards her. She gently kissed his lips. She kissed him passionately and gently. He held her face in his hands and gently kissed her pink lips. Yoon Shusha couldn't help but smile. She lowered her eyelashes and touched the tip of his nose. She gently breathed in his gentle breath, but her heart was incomparably calm. Mu Yaja dried her hair and carried her to the bed. He had just turned around when Yoon Shusha reached out and grabbed his sleeve in a panic. The man turned around in confusion, only to hear her whisper to him, where are you going? Seeing that he was holding a blanket in his hand, she then realized that he was going to put the things away. She whispered, let's go later. Can you accompany me for a while more? Mu Yaja was stunned but didn't say anything. He put the things aside and sat down again. Very naturally, he held her icy cold hand. Yun Shusha saw that he couldn't hide his tiredness and hurriedly asked, are you very tired? Do you want to rest for a while too? Mu Yaja frowned slightly, no need. But I see that you're so tired. Chapter 1062. Yun Shusha quickly shifted her body to make room for him. Patting the bed, Yun Shusha smiled and said, you should lie down and rest for a while too. It's good to close your eyes and rest your mind. Mu Yaja was stunned and turned his face away silently. There was a rare unnatural expression on his face, and his cheeks were strangely red. He slowly stood up, took off his suit jacket, and sat sideways on the bed. Yun Shusha made room for him again, afraid that he would feel squeezed. He was so tall that for a moment, the luxurious bed actually felt a little cramped. Mu Yaja lay down and very naturally put his arm around her shoulders. Yun Shusha was stunned. For a moment, she was so greedy for this casual and gentle action. Her head gently leaned against his shoulder and she secretly laughed. In her heart, she tasted a hint of sweetness. A certain man glanced at her, only to see the little woman in his arms curled up into a ball. Her face was flushed, and she pursed her lips to hide her laughter. Perhaps it was an instinctive action, but he pinched her cheeks. His expression was a little fierce, as if he was trying his best to hide something. What are you laughing at? Mu Yaja, Yun Shusha's voice was soft and gentle. She was afraid that she would ruin this rare moment of peace and happiness. She was also a little uneasy. I'm not dreaming, right? Mu Yaja was puzzled by her words. What do you mean? Yun Shusha bit her lip, opened her arms and hugged him. She said, I feel very happy, really. She wasn't very good at sweet-talking, but what she said was from the bottom of her heart. She thought about how this man used to be insufferably arrogant, but now, he was so careful with her. There was a deep sense of happiness that she was seriously cherished. He used to be such an arrogant man. Yet, he was so gentle and doting on her. It really made her feel like she was dreaming, and she couldn't help but feel that it was a little unreal. When Mu Yaja heard this, he looked at the smiling woman in his arms. Was she satisfied with just this? Yun Shusha didn't understand what he was thinking. Seeing that he didn't speak, she tugged at his collar. However, she saw him suddenly lower his head and cover her lips, fiercely blocking the words she hadn't said yet. His kiss came suddenly and fiercely, but gradually, it became gentle again. He softly rubbed against her lips, sometimes delicately pecking and gently tracing the breath of her lips. As their breaths met, Yun Shusha could not help but lose herself in this deep kiss. She could not help wrapping her arms around his waist. However, he was not willing to go any deeper with this kiss. He was a man with both physical and mental health. If this continued, he might not be able to control himself and want her. But her body was too weak right now, and she couldn't bear him for the time being. She thought so unwillingly and ended the lingering kiss. Go to sleep. Mu Yaja covered her with a blanket, laid down beside her, and pulled her into his arms. Yun Shusha was indeed tired. After a night of fright, her mental strength was completely depleted, so she fell into a deep sleep not long after. Seeing that she had fallen asleep, Mu Yaja opened his eyes. He gently flipped over and got off the bed, carefully tucking her in. Chapter 1063. At Disheng Building. When the assistant respectfully pushed open the door, Mu Yaja walked in expressionlessly. When Kong Chixian saw him, he immediately stood up from the sofa and put on a fawning smile. However, his face was filled with worry because his daughter had offended the man in front of him. On one side of his face, there was a smile, but on the other, there was guilt. His facial expression was a little stiff and a little ugly. Kong Xiaoqian, on the other hand, was in a daze at the sight of the man. She was unable to react even when she saw him approaching. In a sense, this was the first time she had seen Mu Yaja, and it was also the first time she had come into such close contact with him. Before this, she had not had much interaction with him. She had only heard her father mention this amazing person from time to time. Whether it was in the business world or his social charm, Mu Yaja was a legend in the business world. Rumor had it that although he appeared cold on the surface, he was actually a devoted and sincere person. Just from the fact that he had single-handedly made Yun Shusha famous, it was obvious. In the early years, when the CEO of the Mu Corporation was still Mu Sheng, the Mu Corporation was already hailed as a great financial group. However, Mu Yaja was even more scheming than Old Master Mu. Under his leadership, the achievements of this business empire were even more eye-catching. There was no doubt that this was an extremely charming man, and he was also a man that many socialites and young ladies flocked to. But Kong Xiaoqian secretly gritted her teeth and looked at the handsome man in front of her. She could not help but clench her fists. Until now, she still could not believe that Yun Shusha was Mu Yaja's woman. She was even more unwilling to believe that Mu Yaja would not hesitate to acquire the Kong Corporation and destroy it for Yun Shusha. This surprised her very much. How could such an outstanding man dote on a woman to such an extent? Even when this man walked up to her and told her personally, she was still unwilling to believe it. In her heart, a strong sense of jealousy was constantly causing trouble. She had to admit that, in terms of looks, Yun Shusha was indeed one of the better ones. However, she was born in such a foul place like the entertainment industry. How could she be worthy of Mu Yaja? When she heard that this woman was Mu Yaja's woman, she almost laughed to tears. At that time, she had thought that Yun Shusha was delusional to think that she wanted to climb the social ladder. How dare she fantasize about marrying into a rich family like the Mu Group? Not to mention anything else, what qualifications did she have to be worthy of Mu Yaja? Even if Mu Yaja had taken a liking to her, Grandpa Mu would surely not allow an actress to enter the Mu family, would he? Because of this, it was precisely because she had no power or influence, a mere nobody, that she could be at ease to act. However, little did she know, just now, she heard from her father that Yun Shusha's debut was made famous by Mu Yaja. It was obvious how important she was to him. And her actions this time were no different from rubbing the whiskers in a tiger's face and inviting trouble onto herself. This time, she might even implicate the entire Kong consortium. Chapter 1064. Kong Xiaoqian was shocked. She reacted quickly and stood up in a flurry. Even though she had been educated in social etiquette, she did not know what to do in front of such a domineering man. She was baptized by his icy cold gaze. She did not even know where to put her hand. She had to admit that this man's aura was too terrifying. It was too oppressive. His tall figure stood there for a long time, making the large reception room feel extremely oppressive. His icy cold gaze was undoubtedly a disguised attempt to kill and despise her. Mu Yaja stopped in his tracks and asked her coldly, "You are Kong Xiaoqian?" His voice was very low, and there was a hint of coldness in it. Kong Xiaoqian's heart shuddered when she heard that. She did not know how to answer. After all, she was his daughter. Kong Qixian saw her reaction and knew that his precious daughter was intimidated by Mu Yaja's aura. Hence, he hurriedly extended his hand and said politely, "Young Master Mu, I'm sorry to disturb you. Please forgive us for coming uninvited." Mu Yaja was a little displeased to be interrupted by him. He coldly glanced at him from the corner of his eyes, his icy gaze sizing him up from top to bottom. Finally, his gaze stopped at the hand he stretched out. His sharp eyebrows were somewhat disdainful and frivolous. His thin lips suddenly raised in an indifferent arc as he said in a lukewarm manner, "Did I ask you a question?" He did not intend to give Kong Qixian any face at all. Kong Qixian suddenly felt extremely awkward. His face was a little embarrassed, and his outstretched hand froze in midair. He did not know whether to retract it or not. After a long while, he reluctantly withdrew his hand, feeling a little angry in his heart. He had taken the initiative to apologize and even extended his hand to please him. Yet, he did not even want to shake his hand. It was as if it would dirty his hand. This Mu Yaja was very arrogant at such a young age. However, it was understandable that this man did have the right to be arrogant. Just based on his identity as the CEO of Mu Group, even if he were to embarrass him thousands of times, he would not be able to say anything against him. Mu Yaja laughed coldly and sneered, You also know that you came uninvited. Kong Chixian was stunned for a moment and actually didn't know what to say all of a sudden. This kid really didn't leave them any face at all. He turned around and said coldly to Kong Xiaoqian, "It seems that you haven't answered my question." Kong Xiaoqian was stunned. She lowered her head and said in a trembling voice, "Young Master Mu. I'm sorry." Mu Yaja's face darkened as he snorted, "Yes or no?" Kong Xiaoqian was stunned for a moment before realizing what he was asking. She quickly replied, I am Kong Xiaoqian, the head of Huanyu's Public Relations Department. Kong Xiaoqian. He read out her name word by word and scoffed. Nice name, but vicious heart. Kong Chixian, you raised a good daughter. His voice was so cold that it made people shudder. At that moment, Mu Yaja was looking at her with a piercing gaze. It was as if his gaze was poisonous, quietly eroding her skin. Chapter 1065. Even Kong Chixian, who had been through a lot in the business world, was a little frightened. He felt that Mu Yaja's gaze was too cold, so he quickly pulled Kong Xiaoqian behind him to protect her. He said tactfully, "Young Master Mu, haha. Look, it's indeed my Qianer's fault in this matter. But you, please be magnanimous and don't stoop to her level. She's just a child. She's inexperienced, so she's naturally insensible. If she offended you in any way and offended Yoon, oh, no, offended Miss Yoon, I'll swallow my pride and apologize to you. But, please don't take my Xiaoqian so seriously. I'm already so old, and I only have one precious daughter." Mu Yaja raised an eyebrow and abruptly turned around to stare at him. He said coldly, "Shut up." Kong Chixian abruptly stopped talking, his complexion instantly becoming incomparably pale from shock. He was so angry that he laughed and retorted, "Do you think your daughter is the only precious one? Then what about his woman? Could it be that if something happened to her, she would deserve to die?" Kong Chixian was at a loss for words. However, he heard Mu Yaja say coldly, "Get lost." "No, young Master Mu. I beg you. I'm begging you on behalf of the 30,000-odd employees of the Kong Consortium. Please spare the Kong Consortium." Mu Yaja suddenly revealed a cruel and bloodthirsty smile and said unhurriedly, "I'll naturally spare the Kong Consortium, but that doesn't mean I'll let you all off." Kong Xiaoqian suddenly pushed Kong Chixian away gently and stood in front of him protectively. She mustered her courage and raised her head, forcing herself to meet his cold gaze. She said, "This is all my fault. I was also the one who did this to Yoon Shusha. It had nothing to do with my father at all. I also know that it's my fault. I failed to recognize your greatness and offended the person I shouldn't have offended the most. I was the one who made a mistake. So, young Master Mu, please come at me if you have any grievances. Don't target my father and the Kong Consortium. I admit to this crime." His words were filled with righteousness, but he was unwilling to do so. "Xiaoqian." Kong Chixian's heart ached. He reached out to pull Kong Xiaoqian behind him. However, she said stubbornly, "Daddy, don't worry about me. I brought this upon myself. I can't implicate the Kong Consortium." Then she turned around and said firmly, "Young Master Mu, I'll do whatever you want me to do. But please spare the Kong Consortium." How filial. Mu Yaja chuckled and suddenly reached out to grab her by the throat. However, his voice was emotionless like a ruthless demon. His words were bloodthirsty. "What if I want you to sue?" Kong Xiaoqian didn't expect this man to be so ruthless. She was shocked for a moment, and then her face turned red from suffocation. She frowned because she couldn't breathe properly. When Kong Chixian saw this, he was so frightened that he held his breath. He immediately rushed up and tried to pry Mu Yaja's hand away. However, he was old after all, and Mu Yaja had undergone professional training, so how could an ordinary person compare to him? Despite sweating profusely for a long time, his fingers were still tightly clasped and did not move at all. When Kong Chixian saw his daughter's face turning paler and paler, he was secretly shocked. This man was really going to kill her. He was also shocked. Chapter 1066. He believed Mu Yaja was fully capable of doing so. However, she was still his daughter, after all. No matter what Kong Xiaoqian had done, he could not just stand by and watch his daughter die without caring about his dignity. He knelt straight on the ground and kept kowtowing to Mu Yaja. Young Master Mu. Young Master Mu. I beg you. Please let my Xiaoqian off. Xiaoqian is still young and insensible. If she gets into trouble, it'll be my responsibility. Bam. 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 He kowtowed again and again until his head hit the hard and cold marble floor with a resounding thud. However, Mu Yaja did not even look at him with an indifferent expression on his face. Kong Qixuan was getting more and more anxious. He crawled over on his knees and grabbed Mu Yaja's straight pants. Tears streamed down his face as he said, Young Master Mu. I only have one daughter, Xiaoqian. I beg you, please let Xiaoqian off. I beg you. I beg you. Mu Yaja narrowed his eyes slightly and glanced at Kong Qixuan, who was crying hysterically from the corner of his eye. He loosened his grip slightly and frowned. He lowered his eyelashes slightly and suddenly flung Kong Xiaoqian aside. Kong Qixuan was overjoyed. He rushed over to his daughter in a panic and helped her up. He asked repeatedly, Xiaoqian, Xiaoqian, how are you, Xiaoqian? Are you all right? Kong Xiaoqian was still coughing non-stop as she gasped for fresh air. However, due to the excessive shock, her lips were trembling violently, and her eyes were brimming with tears. In the blink of an eye, they rolled down her cheeks. Still in shock, she hugged Kong Qixuan's shoulder and cried out in pain, Daddy, this man was simply too terrifying. He was really as cold-blooded and ruthless as the rumors said. Kong Qixuan, if this is how you teach your daughter, you're really a terrible father. Mu Yaja turned around and looked down at them. He sneered and said, Don't think I'll let the Kong consortium off just like that. I'll let you know that no one can bully my, Mu Yaja's, woman. Kong Qixuan nodded repeatedly. Right now, be it the East Bay Project, the Kong consortium, or anything else, it was no longer important. He knew that Mu Yaja was already being magnanimous. He was more or less being humane. If it was in the past, if she angered this man, the consequences would be unimaginable. She would only end up in hell. And just now, he had already given them some face. Without the Kong consortium, he could still rebuild it. But without his daughter, he would have nothing left. Scram. Mu Yaja turned around. Don't let me see you again. Yes, yes. Kong Qixuan and Kong Xiaoqian helped each other up. Kong Xiaoqian looked at Mu Yaja with lingering fear before leaving the room with Kong Qixuan. At the same time, something happened on the other side. On the other hand, Li Dongliang learned from his secretary that Yun Shusha had been bailed out by a big shot. Wasn't it the director who personally escorted her to the car? This news made him so angry he nearly jumped out of his bed. Chapter 1067. Not only did this hurt him, but he had already arranged everything. He had contacted his lawyer and the court and arranged everything in secret. He had even drafted 2 power of attorney to sue Shongyu. He was just waiting to teach this ungrateful brat a lesson. However, his secretary told him on the phone that this brat had been bailed out with a huge sum of money. This time, Li Dongliang was so angry that he blew his beard and glared. In this capital city, right under his nose, there was actually someone who openly took someone away from his hands. In a moment of anger, he was so angry that he almost flew into a rage. He didn't think much about it and immediately scolded, Damn it! What the F***ck did you do for me? I wanted to teach Yun Shusha a lesson, but you guys did it for me. Do you still want to work for me? He didn't know who had bailed that brat out. Most importantly, the person that he wanted to teach a lesson to was taken away without any news. That so-called big shot didn't say anything either. They really didn't take him seriously. In the capital, his status was very high and he had a strong backing. Who was it that dared to take her away right under his nose and didn't even bother to say a word? They didn't take him seriously at all. It would be strange if he didn't fly into a rage. The secretary was shocked by his angry roar and almost cried. She replied in a trembling voice, Boss, this isn't something that we can control. Someone is bailing out the girl, so we can't do anything about it. I heard from the bureau chief that the person who bailed him out was a person of high status and he didn't dare to offend him. Therefore, he let her go without a second word. He told me to tell you not to worry too much about that brat and don't spend too much effort on her. The person behind her isn't someone you can afford to offend. Li Dongliang's eyes widened and he shouted, "What? What do you mean by not someone I can afford to offend? Ha! I dare say that in the capital, there's no one that I, Li Dongliang, can't afford to offend." The secretary was so shocked that she shrank her shoulders and quickly explained herself, I really don't know. I've already arranged everything. The judge, the lawyer. I also received the news not long ago, so I called you immediately. I heard that it's a big shot, so. Li Dongliang hung up the phone angrily. He didn't think much and personally called the bureau chief. The moment the call connected, he shouted loudly, "Bureau Chief Chen, what's going on? Where's the person I want?" Bureau Chief Chen had just finished a meeting and was frustrated. Once he heard Li Dongliang's voice, the anger in his heart. Mother asterisk K, this is simply F asterisk ked up. Speaking of their relationship, there was a layer of connection between them. They rarely met each other. It was purely because of that person's face that they agreed to work for Li Dongliang. They did not have much of a friendship before. Speaking of Li Dongliang, Bureau Chief Chen was still angry in his heart. It was because he had caused so much trouble for him that day. Chapter 1068. It was fine if Li Dongliang wanted to teach someone a lesson. It wasn't a big deal, and he could still intervene, but this person was Mu Yaja's woman. Who was Mu Yaja? That was the crown prince with an extraordinary background in the capital. Even those in the underworld in the capital had to respect him to some extent. They couldn't wait to worship him, not to mention a mere bureau chief. He did not care how Mu Yaja's men had provoked Li Dongliang, nor did he care how they had formed a grudge against each other. Anyway, he only knew that in a power struggle, a smart person had to learn to protect himself. Otherwise, he wouldn't know how he died. However, even though he was annoyed with Li Dongliang, he couldn't be too harsh with his words. Thus, he restrained his anger and asked calmly, "Boss Li, why did you call me? What are you talking about that makes me confuse? Wasn't that the girl I sent to you the last time? Why didn't you tell me before letting her go?" Listening to his irritable tone, it was obvious that he was furious. Bureau Chief Chen sighed and said unhappily, "Young Master Mu asked me for her. How could I not let her go?" Young Master Mu? Li Dongliang was stunned. Obviously, he didn't react. He heard Bureau Chief Chen mutter and change the topic. "Boss Li, if you want me to work for you, it's definitely not a problem, but you can't push me into the fire pit." "What do you mean?" "Young Master Mu, which Young Master Mu?" On the other end, Bureau Chief Chen rolled his eyes and asked him back, "In the capital, who else can take someone away from me and make me respectfully call him Young Master Mu?" But it was the truth. Bureau Chief Chen held a high position. The only person who could make him obediently let someone go was. Li Dongliang frowned. "Mu Yaja? Isn't that the crown prince?" Chief Chen still had a lingering fear when he mentioned his name. "It's not that I didn't dare to offend him, so I let him go. What did young Master Mu's woman do to you?" Upon hearing the name Mu Yaja, Li Dongliang's heart skipped a beat. However, even though he felt a chill in his heart, he still forced himself to maintain his composure. Isn't it that brat? What are you afraid of?" Chief Chen gasped in his heart. He thought that Li Dongliang was a frog in a well and did not know the gravity of the situation. He snorted and said, "Anyway, I'm at my wit's end. I don't dare to offend such a distinguished person as young Master Mu. I think you should find someone else." After hanging up the phone, Li Dongliang felt a chill in his heart. He sat on the bed in a daze for a long time, but he couldn't understand how this Yun Shusha was related to that crown prince again. He didn't expect Yun Shusha to really be Mu Yaja's woman. Moreover, she seemed to hold some weight. Mu Yaja's name was too resounding, but Li Dongliang did not know much about him. Just as he had said earlier, this big shot was famous, but very few people could find out about his background. Most people only knew that he was the distinguished entertainment tycoon in the capital, the crown prince of a financial magnate. However, just based on this title, he could sit high and mighty in the capital. Chapter 1069. Although he still hated Yun Shusha so much that he wanted to rush over to Mu Yaja and ask him for her, He only had the guts to think about it. He didn't have the guts to do it. Now that this woman had used some unknown means to hug this big tree, he couldn't do anything to her. At least for now, Li Dongliang could forget about having any thoughts of touching her. With some thoughts in his mind, Li Dongliang couldn't sleep well for the entire afternoon. He lay in bed and pondered for a long time, but he couldn't figure it out. In the afternoon, Sun Hua braced himself and went to the hospital again, hoping to ask for some mercy. He didn't disturb him for 2 days. First, he hoped that Li Dongliang could take advantage of these 2 days to vent his anger. Second, he couldn't sit still. Sun Hua didn't know where he heard the news that Li Dongliang was planning to deal with Yun Shusha. He had even drafted a complaint. It seemed that he was quite angry. He didn't want to be implicated. He was so flustered that he couldn't sleep well for 2 days. It had to be said that Universal Pictures was big, but it was just a small first-rate company. It relied on the models and actors under it to make a name for itself. However, the drama of promoting actors and actresses was very old-fashioned and despicable. It was nothing more than using the unspoken rules to get to the top, or relying on some scandals to get to the top. Relying on Li Dongliang, Universal Pictures got a big bargain. With many financial backers supporting them, there was really a celebrity who was promoted to a first-rate position. It also raised the company's reputation to a new level. It was widely rumored that Universal Pictures' current status was enough to compete with Huanyu. But was that really the case? It was an entertainment company. When the actors became popular, the company's reputation would naturally increase. It was nothing more than the principle of sharing glory together. However, in the fierce competition in Beijing's entertainment industry, the share it occupied was really insignificant. If they really compared it to Huanyu, they could crush Shongyu with one finger. Sun Hua couldn't just watch himself fall. But he had to admit that he came at the wrong time. He knocked on the door of the ward. As soon as he walked in, Li Dongliang's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. He shouted at him, "Damn it! You bastard, how dare you come here?" Sun Hua knew that he was in the wrong, but he felt that something was wrong. 2 days had passed, but this old thing's anger didn't seem to have subsided at all. He nodded with a smile on his face. No matter if it was a beating or a scolding, he would grit his teeth and endure it. Who didn't know how to act like a grandson? Yes, it's my fault. I'm not a thing. Please bear with it and calm down. Don't let your anger affect your health. Otherwise, the losses will outweigh the gains. The more Li Dongliang saw him smiling like this, the more he looked down on him. He was so angry that his mouth was almost crooked. He shouted, "Do I need you to teach me how to behave?" The smile on Sun Hua's face was extremely charming. "I wouldn't dare. I'm here to apologize to you." It would have been fine if Li Dongliang did not mention it, but the moment he did, Li Dongliang's teeth itched with hatred. He stretched out his index finger and wanted to poke the tip of Sun Hua's nose. He said angrily, "Sun Hua, let me ask you, what are your intentions?" It's fine if you send other women to me, but how dare you touch young Master Mu's woman? You dare to send her to me, but I don't have the fortune to enjoy it." This caused Sun Hua to be confused. This Li Dongliang, this old fox, was very clear at the crucial moment. It was obvious that he had taken a fancy to Yun Shusha first, so he thought of a way to get her for him. Chapter 1070. Now that he had offended someone, he was pushing the blame to him. Young Master Mu? From Li Dongliang's tone, it seemed like young Master Mu had a powerful background. Sun Hua had also heard of young Master Mu and knew that he was a big shot, but it was not to the extent that even Li Dongliang was afraid of him. However, it was no wonder that he was ignorant and inexperienced. Even Li Dongliang was unable to associate with such a figure. With Sun Hua's qualifications, how could he be qualified to come into contact with such a figure? He had probably never even heard of such a person. Hence, he was confused. "Boss Li. What do you mean by that? Why don't I understand?" "You don't understand? You're the one who found Yun Shusha for me. Didn't you find out about her beforehand? Now, you still don't understand. I think you understand it very well in your heart. Since your artist can climb up to such a high position, Why do you have to force it into my hands? Are you trying to make trouble for me? One of young Master Mu's fingers is as thick as my waist. You even sent his woman to me. Are you trying to kill me by doing this? Sun Hua was even more confused. Young Master Mu? This. How did Yun Shusha manage to climb up to someone like young Master Mu? Why have I never heard of him? Wait a minute. Was the young Master Mu that Li Dongliang was talking about the young Master Mu that he knew? Hence, he said, haha. Who exactly is this young Master Mu that Boss Li is talking about? Li Dongliang laughed coldly. Sun Hua, don't play dumb with me. You're in this business in Beijing. How could you not know about this entertainment tycoon? Entertainment tycoon? Ah, Boss Li, are you talking about the person who became the head of Disheng Financial Group at such a young age, Mu Yaja? Li Dongliang sneered. Why are you pretending to be dumb with me? Do you know that you almost got me killed? Yun Shusha, haha, I don't dare to take over her. Don't worry, with young Master Mu around, I won't touch this woman, and I won't go against Huan Yu. Pausing for a moment, his tone suddenly turned dark and cold. But Sun Hua, I'll never let you off the hook for the rest of my life. Sun Hua still wanted to explain, but Li Dongliang rolled his eyes and mercilessly kicked him out of the ward. He really couldn't understand. Why was Yun Shusha getting involved with that guy again? Speaking of Li Dongliang, this old thing, he changed his attitude so quickly. Sun Hua scolded him harshly in his heart. Only then did he straighten his collar and leave the ward. Naturally, he had to investigate this matter thoroughly. The night was cold, and in the blink of an eye, it was already late at night. When Mu Yaja returned, he saw a painting of a living beauty. He specially brought the two little fellows over. Yo-Yo did not receive any news from Yun Shusha the entire night and was worried sick. Of course, Mu Yaja was tight-lipped about what had happened last night. He only said that Yun Shusha had slept over at his place. Yo-Yo sulked. Why didn't Mommy tell him that she was coming home late? He was so worried that he couldn't sleep well last night. In fact, She had run to Yun Shusha's house and pressed the doorbell, but no one answered. It was because she had knocked on the wrong door. She had pressed the doorbell of Jun Mo's house. Jun Mo was filming a fashion show overseas, so no one was home. The night was too dark, and Yun Shusha's house was the same as Jun Mo's, so she had mistaken the door. This was a big mistake. Chapter 1071. Yun Shan Shiyi's villa wasn't for sale yet. Mu Yaja's villa was undoubtedly the best in the area. It was designed in a classical garden style and was extremely beautiful. It was Xiao Chen's first time here. As soon as he stepped into the villa, his little face was filled with amazement. He dragged Yo-Yo around for a tour. Yo-Yo was reluctant. He missed Yun Shusha, but he couldn't resist Xiao Chen's coaxing and pestering. He handed the cooked porridge to Mu Yaja. "This is the porridge I cooked for Mommy. You must feed it to Mommy personally." After he finished speaking, he was dragged to the back garden by Xiao Chen. In the bedroom, there was only an extremely dim wall lamp that was lit. Yun Shusha was lying on the sofa quietly. She curled up into a small ball on the huge bed and hugged the pillow. Her breathing was light and gentle. She seemed to be extremely tired and was in a deep sleep. She didn't even realize that she was awake when he came close to her. She seemed to have woken up. She had changed into a snow-white cotton sweater. The simple design was a little loose, but it made her look even slimmer and smaller. She was curled up in a corner of the bed. She looked like a furry Persian cat. She was especially cute and tempting to be petted. Her face was still breathtakingly beautiful even though she was in a light sleep. Her fair and smooth skin looked as if it could be broken with a flick of a finger. Looking at her thin, green eyebrows, it was like a natural drawing. Her eyes were lightly closed, and her thick and long eyelashes were slightly trembling. With just a glance, her entire small face was like a meticulously drawn ink painting. Especially under the contrast of the retro lighting, it looked even more beautiful than before. One side of the bed was slightly sunken. Mu Yaja sat down and lowered his head to look at her. At this moment, her shoulders were moving up and down slightly with her even breathing. In the dim light, her small mouth opened and closed slightly. Although it wasn't moisturized, Her lips were extremely moist. They were red and delicate and cute. She seemed to be dreaming of something as she pursed her lips unconsciously. Such a casual action was quite bewitching. It was as if she was silently inviting him to do something. Before he came back, he had just left the Vanity Fair and experienced a conflict of interests. He was already in a bad mood. However, seeing this woman eased his tense and gloomy mood. At least he didn't feel so frustrated anymore. Reaching out his hand, his slender fingers gently caressed her lips. His icy cold fingertips traced along her captivating red lips. The warmth from his fingertips made his heart skip a beat. She had actually aroused his desire just like that. That small mouth that seemed to be slightly opened made people want to take a bite out of it and taste the sweetness of it. In fact, he put it into action and did it. Muyaja slowly lowered his head. His large palm cupped that pretty and tender face and accurately sucked on her lips. The tip of his tongue licked her lips heavily. While she was unconscious, he invaded her lips and wantonly engulfed her in a sweet maze. The fragrance was so beautiful that he couldn't help but feel a little loss. Their charming and gentle breaths were so intimate that it couldn't be any more intimate. In the dream, she seemed to be aware of his aggressive actions and groaned in dissatisfaction. Chapter 1072. He almost couldn't control himself. He couldn't wait to take her directly and mercilessly take off all the clothes on her body. Then he entered her fiercely and wildly, wantonly admiring the rosy red on her face. He didn't know why, but he suddenly remembered that night 7 years ago. It was a carefree and unrestrained night. His ears seemed to vaguely echo with her heavy breathing and that sexy and coquettish moan. It had to be said that her voice was extremely beautiful, especially on the bed. That voice almost turned him into a beast and swallowed her alive. This kiss was even more uncontrollable. The man's tall body pressed down on her body. Coupled with such a deep and passionate kiss, she suddenly woke up from her dream. Yoon Shusha opened her eyes in a daze and felt the slightly heavy weight on her body. After a moment of confusion, she seemed to be a little confused from sleep and couldn't figure out where she was. However, when she gradually regained her consciousness, she suddenly opened her eyes. It didn't matter if she didn't open her eyes. The moment she opened her eyes, she saw that handsome face close by and felt that ambiguous and hot breath on her lips. She suddenly reacted. "You're back." Muyaja made an en sound and pressed down on her body, but was unwilling to get up. Yoon Shusha coquettishly moved away from him. Wherever his breath passed, the pores on her skin couldn't help but shrink. Her hands subconsciously pushed his shoulders, but suddenly he lazily raised his eyes. Under the shadows, those deep black pupils were endless. His long and narrow eyes were slightly narrowed, and the bottom of his eyes was dyed with a few traces of dark desire. The desire hidden in the depths of his eyes was already indescribable. They were so close to each other that she could feel a slight change in his body. "Muyaja, you." Yoon Shusha was embarrassed and angry. This man, how could he be so energetic? "Get up. Get up. You're hurting me," she muttered. Muyaja curled his lips and fiercely pushed down the dark desire in his lower abdomen. He kissed the corner of her lips, and only then was he willing to get up. Yoon Shusha suddenly thought of something and asked nervously, "Muyaja, will I go to jail?" Muyaja cast a sidelong glance at her and poked her head with his slender fingers. "What are you thinking about all day long in that little head of yours?" I'm scared." Muyaja glared at her. "You know how to be scared too." He thought that she was not afraid of anything at all. He didn't expect that there would be times when she was scared. Yoon Shusha took a while to react. Sensing the anger in his words, she lowered her head uneasily. However, from his tone, her worries seemed unnecessary. Thus, she brushed away the uneasiness in her heart. However, from the corner of her eye, she saw that Muyaja's face was a little fierce. She fidgeted again like a child who had done something wrong. She lowered her head and said, "I was wrong." Muyaja harumphed coldly. "What did you do wrong?" Yoon Shusha pouted. "Is that kind of dinner party something you should go to?" I don't know. How would I know these things?" She didn't know, but he knew the unspoken rules of Vanity Fair very well. In this era of material desires, There was no such thing as a pure transaction in business. Mu Yaja still couldn't help but scold her softly, "You're usually so weird. Why are you being bullied when you're outside?" Usually, in front of him, she couldn't be taken advantage of at all. Chapter 1073. Seeing this, Yun Shusha also felt a little guilty. She said meekly, "Mu Yaja. I'm sorry." Mu Yaja's hand paused for a moment. He saw her helplessly clutching the blanket like a child who had done something wrong. Her eyes were red, and tears were about to fall. Her little mouth was slightly pursed, and she looked pitiful. If anyone saw this, they would think that he was the one who had bullied her. He narrowed his eyes helplessly and suppressed the nameless anger in his heart. Suddenly, he sighed and said, "I don't want your apology." Yun Shusha was at a loss for words. She did not know what to say. Could it be that he was angry at her? But she did not want to. If she had known that this would happen, she would not have gone. Seeing that she did not speak, Mu Yaja did not want to talk about it. However, when he thought about how she had been bullied outside, he felt angry again. "Don't worry. You won't go to jail. I'll settle this matter. But there won't be a next time." Yun Shusha sensed the anger in his tone. Tears rolled down her cheeks and dripped onto the back of his hand. It was extremely hot. "You didn't mention my name when you were bullied outside." He could not help but ask. I did mention your name, but Li Dongliang said." She suddenly cleared her throat and imitated Li Dongliang's contemptuous tone. "Mu Yaja? That guy from Disheng Financial Group?" Mu Yaja's face turned ashen. Yun Shusha imitated Li Dongliang's lewd laughter. "Ha ha ha. Fine. Even if you're Mu Yaja's woman, I'll treat you as his woman. Then today, I'll have a good taste of Mu Yaja's woman." The man's expression became even more gloomy. He was infuriated by this stupid woman. She repeated Li Dongliang's words with some embellishment. Then, with a very distant look in her eyes, she silently accused her. With tears in her eyes, she said, "It's obviously because you're not intimidating enough." Mu Yaja was stunned. Not enough deterrence. The corners of his eyes twitched. It was only then that Yun Shusha noticed his gloomy expression. She smiled and said, "All right. I'm just teasing you. Just smile. Don't be so serious. Otherwise, I'll feel guilty." Mu Yaja snorted coldly and took out the insulated box. "Don't film anymore. Stay at home. I'll take care of it." Yun Shusha was startled, but she shook her head. "No. I want to earn money to support myself and Yo-Yo and Xiao Chen." Mu Yaja said coldly, "What, are you afraid that I can't afford to raise you?" Yun Shusha pouted and did not speak. Mu Yaja continued, "Don't worry. The Mews are so big. Even if there are 100 of you, we can still afford to raise you. If there are 100 of me, there will have to be 100 Mu Yaja." Mu Yaja was speechless. Yun Shusha continued, "I'm very greedy. I don't want to fight with 99 other people for you." Mu Yaja suddenly did not know what to say. Yun Shusha wrapped her arms around his waist and said, "I want to work. I want to work hard to become an outstanding person." Only by becoming an outstanding person would she be able to stand beside him and not be overshadowed. Mu Yaja's thin lips curled up slightly. He understood her stubbornness. Hence, he did not take a hard stance on this matter. "Have some porridge." He placed the pillow behind her back and held the spoon. He scooped a spoonful of porridge and brought it to her lips. Chapter 1074. As if to cooperate, Yun Shusha's stomach rumbled a little. Well, she didn't eat much at the dinner party yesterday, and after a whole night, she was starving now. However, when she looked down and saw that it was vegetarian porridge, her appetite was halved. "Only porridge? Only porridge? Is there no meat?" Mu Yaja raised his eyebrows. "You can eat me. She'd better eat porridge." Yun Shusha opened her mouth and took a sip, but it was scalded and tears almost flowed out. Mu Yaja said, "Slow down." Yun Shusha swallowed it with difficulty. "Help me blow it." The corners of Mu Yaja's eyes twitched fiercely again. He scooped another mouthful and pouted unnaturally as he forced himself to blow a few mouthfuls. That stiff expression made Yun Shusha laugh in her heart. She had never seen Mu Yaja look so adorable before. A certain man looked up and asked angrily, "What are you laughing at?" His voice was cold. Yoon Shusha then realized that the corners of her mouth were curled up too much. She quickly stopped smiling and said seriously, "I just think that you're cute." Mu Yaja ignored her and continued to feed her. He scooped up a mouthful and carefully blew it for her to cool it down. After 3 times, his actions became much more natural. Just like that, he fed her a mouthful, and she drank a mouthful. The room was silent for a moment, and there was only the sound of porridge slurping. Looking at him, Yoon Shusha's heart felt warm. This should be the feeling of happiness, right? This man, with his noble status, must have grown up in luxury and was served like a crown prince. He should have never done this for anyone before, right? Now, he was so considerate. For a moment, Yoon Shusha was really at a loss. "Who cooked this porridge?" she suddenly asked. Mu Yaja frowned and said heartlessly, "I cooked it." "Is it good?" "It doesn't taste good," Yoon Shusha commented honestly. Mu Yaja immediately passed the buck. "Yes. Actually, it's Yo-Yo who cooked it. It's not up to standard." As soon as he said that, Yoon Shusha's face darkened. Yo-Yo, who had walked to the door, suddenly sneezed gracefully. He opened the door and saw Mu Yaja holding a thermos bowl and feeding Yoon Shusha porridge. He smiled with satisfaction. This is what a man should be like. Yo-Yo's conditions for daddy were that he had to be gentle, considerate, powerful, and rich. He had to be a slave to his wife and put mommy first in everything. Not bad. Daddy was slowly moving closer to the ideal of a good husband. Mommy tilde Yo-Yo and Xiao Ichen happily pounced on the bed. The 2 little guys were so noisy that the porridge bowl in Mu Yaja's hands almost toppled over. Mu Yaja was about to flare up when he saw the 2 little guys hanging onto Yoon Shusha's arm like koalas. Their little faces were rubbing against Yoon Shusha's chest. Their expressions, and actions were in perfect sync. Mu Yaja was suddenly speechless. "Mommy, why didn't you come home last night? Why didn't you tell Yo-Yo? You made Yo-Yo so worried." Yo-Yo raised his head. Halfway through his words, he suddenly noticed something. His clear eyes stared fixedly at her face. Yoon Shusha noticed that he was staring at her without blinking. She touched her face in confusion. She didn't feel anything strange. Chapter 1075. "Mommy, why are your eyes so swollen?" Yo-Yo narrowed his eyes. He was very observant. Yoon Shusha's heart skipped a beat. She had cried so hard last night that she slept the whole day. Her eyes were so swollen that they resembled walnuts. Yo-Yo, of course, did not know what had happened last night. He only narrowed his eyes suspiciously and turned to shoot a cold glare at Mu Yaja. "Mommy, did Daddy bully you again?" Mu Yaja was stunned. He was wronged. Yoon Shusha chuckled. She did not know whether to nod or shake her head. Mu Yaja glared at her. Why was this woman not defending him? Yo-Yo was angry. He crossed his arms and glared coldly at Mu Yaja. "Mommy, did Daddy bully you? Tell me. If he bullied you, I won't let him off." Yoon Shusha was amused by his serious look. "How do you intend to not let him off?" Yo-Yo did not say a word, but he gave a sinister smile. His deep eyes hid many flashes of sinister laughter. He was extremely two-faced. Mu Yaja's shoulders trembled. Why was his son so two-faced? He suddenly thought of Lu Jingtian's incident. He did not need to think about it to know who was behind it. Initially, he suspected that it was Yo-Yo's doing, so he went to find the little lad and asked him about it. Yo-Yo admitted it frankly. Mu Yaja immediately realized that his son was more ruthless than him. He was still so young, yet he already had such a ruthless iron fist. What would happen when he grew up? What did Yo-Yo say? "I don't care what others think of me. Anyway, I won't let anyone who bullies Mommy off." As she said this, Yo-Yo's eyes were especially clear. However, the smile in her eyes revealed a sense of arrogance. "I have so much just to protect the people I love. If I can't even do this, then no matter how much I have, what's the point? If I can't even protect the person I love, then what's the point of having so much?" Mu Yaja was deeply shocked by these words. His son turned out to be a mommy's boy. He was also his #1 love rival. Mu Yaja suddenly felt tired. Yoon Shusha was amused and held back her laughter. Yo, your daddy didn't bully me. Mommy didn't sleep well and her eyes are swollen. Chimpage liar. Yo was not someone who could be brushed off with just a few words. Mommy's eyes are so swollen. It's obvious that she cried. Yoon Shusha fell silent. Baby, do you have to be so observant? Tell me, did daddy bully mommy? Yo asked again. Yoon Shusha fell silent. No. Yo shot Mu Yaja another glare. Mu Yaja felt that he was unjustly implicated. Yoon Shusha looked at the silent confrontation between father and son. She did not know whether to laugh or cry. All right. It's so late. Stop fooling around. Let's go to bed. At night, Mu Yaja sat in the study. Minute you sent him 2 secretly taken photos. One of them was a photo of Yoon Shusha being dragged out of the hotel by Lee Dongliang. Even though they knew what was going on, just by looking at the photo, which was secretly taken from this angle, the two of them seemed to be pulling at each other, entangling each other. The photo clearly captured Yoon Shusha's facial features. However, because of the angle and the photo taken, the two of them looked ambiguous and entangled. Chapter 1076. These 2 photos were secretly taken by the paparazzi. It was said that the paparazzi originally wanted to upload these 2 photos online. Without a doubt, if these 2 photos were uploaded online, it would definitely cause an uproar. Yoon Shusha accompanied her to dinner and used the unspoken rules to get a role. Whether it was true or not, a scandal about the unspoken rules would cause immeasurable damage to an artist. Especially in terms of popularity. Take Tang Yu for example. After the unspoken rules were exposed, she was banned by Huanyu and her contract was terminated. Her popularity hit rock bottom, and all her endorsements were cancelled. She even had to pay a huge penalty for breaching her contract. Now, she could only take on some web dramas to maintain her pitiful exposure. There was even a rumor about her not long ago. Although that was Tang Yu's last-ditch attempt to hype herself up, her life was indeed not easy after the unspoken rules were exposed. She had to pay a huge penalty for breaching her contract. Because of the series of negative news after the unspoken rules were exposed, all the advertisers asked for a penalty for breaching their contracts. Now, she was heavily in debt. She even had to put down her pride and status some time ago and negotiate a contract with a Hong Kong crew for a pornographic film. What kind of situation was she in? She even accepted a pornographic film. It seemed that Tang Yu was living a miserable life. Moreover, a new starlet like Yoon Shusha couldn't be tainted at all. If she was involved in scandals like the unspoken rules when her career was on the rise, it would definitely have a huge impact. If these 2 photos were uploaded online, Chungwang Entertainment would definitely take advantage of this loophole and use the popularity of Yoon Shusha to stir up public opinion and create rumors that Yoon Shusha stole Lin Ji's role through the unspoken rules. Yoon Shusha's popularity was on the rise now. She had a lot of film offers, and many advertising companies targeted her pure aura and proposed to work with her. Chin Ju had just accepted 3 cosmetics endorsements for her. They were all international luxury brands. Chin Ju had even negotiated a 7-figure endorsement deal for her. For a newcomer who had just debuted, this was an astronomical sum. It was very impressive, and many people were jealous. There was a lot of trouble when one was popular. After the incident, Huanyu sent people to investigate all the people who had attended the dinner that day. All the photos of Yoon Shusha were deleted from their phones. However, there were still fish that escaped the net. The reporter was just about to upload the photos he had secretly taken online. Fortunately, the website he had uploaded them to was Huanyu's #1 media portal. Therefore, the photos he had uploaded were stopped by the website's technical department during the review stage. When Minute Yu heard the news, he contacted the reporter and offered a high price for the photos. Strangely, the reporter refused to sell it. Minute Yu couldn't help but feel suspicious. The price he quoted wasn't low, but the reporter refused to budge. Could it be that these photos were taken by someone behind the scenes? But if he refused to sell, did Minute Yu have no other choice? Refusing a toast only to drink a forfeit. Soon, He was to be detained for 24 hours. During this period, Minute Yu used some tricks to get him to submit. He handed over the negatives and signed the agreement. Only then did Minute Yu let him go. As soon as the reporter was released, he called his financial backer and said that Huan Yu had sent people to confiscate his camera and negatives. Chapter 1077. The reporter felt very aggrieved. He had received a hefty reward, but she had also taken the photos, had she not? Huan Yu had offered a high price to buy them out. The price was even several times higher than the reward given to him by his sugar daddy. It was already very generous of him not to sell them. As for the photos and negatives being confiscated, that was something he could not do anything about. Huan Yu was supporting Yun Shusha, and they would eliminate any public opinion that was slightly unfavorable to her. He had suffered a lot in the police station and could not take it anymore, so he gave in. The sugar daddy could not take it anymore. This was a classic case of losing the bait and losing the bait. He hung up the phone angrily. However, this was all for another day. Mu Yaja looked at the two photos and pondered for a moment. To be safe, he ordered Minute Yu to destroy both photos and negatives to prevent them from leaking out. Minute Yu immediately did as he was told. Boss, Li Dongliang will be discharged the day after tomorrow. What do you plan to do? Keep a close eye on him. Okay. On the other end. Song residence. When Song Enya learned that the photos had been confiscated by Huan Yu, she threw her phone to the ground in exasperation and sat on the sofa with a furious expression. Song Yunshi, who was beside her, saw her exasperated look and could not help but tease. What's wrong? Who made my precious sister angry again? Who else could it be? Is it that Yun Shusha again? Song Yunshi's expression changed and suddenly sank. Song Enya snorted and did not comment. Song Yunshi pondered for a moment, but this time, he did not stand on her side blindly. Instead, he said lightly, is it because of Uncle Mu again? Enya, I don't want to nag you, but you should give up on him. Why? Brother, why are you siding with an outsider? Why are you speaking up for an outsider? Song Enya stood up agitatedly and glared at him angrily. Song Yunshi said disapprovingly, I just want you to give up on Uncle Mu. I have no intention of helping an outsider. Besides, you're my sister. I can't wait to dote on you. How can I bear to let you be bullied? Brother, Song Enya said unhappily, that Yun Shusha is so annoying. If I can, I really want to make her disappear from this world completely. Song Yunshi was shocked. She immediately covered her mouth and glared at her. Are you crazy? How could such words be spoken so carelessly? Mom and Dad are here. If they hear you, you'll be in big trouble. That's the truth. Song Enya refused to admit it. Who asked her to be so shameless as to snatch Brother Mu from me? You only talk about Brother Mu all day long. I don't know what's so good about him that you miss him so much. Song Yunshi's words sounded sour. Song Enya gloomily replied, Brother, do you know? This Yun Shusha was really despicable. Huan Yu was so supportive of her, yet she still shamelessly went to a dinner party. Wasn't this the unspoken rule? The paparazzi secretly took photos of her and her dinner party, but they were confiscated by Huan Yu. Yun Shusha is just a small artiste. Why does Brother Mu spoil her so much? She even had a meal with a big boss. It's obvious that she's betraying Brother Mu. Doesn't he care? Song Yunshi raised an eyebrow. Things may not be what you see. Then what is it? Song Enya sneered. There's a saying that goes, what you hear is false, but seeing is believing. The photos were clearly taken. Does this Yun Shusha still want to deny it? Chapter 1078. She had hired the paparazzi to secretly take photos of Yun Shusha. Originally, she wanted to catch some of her scandals and release them to the public. It would be best if Brother Mu could see this woman's dirty face clearly. However, when she finally got her hands on the photos, Huan Yu actually deleted them. It was even possible that Brother Mu had secretly instructed them to do so. How could she not be angry? She was simply about to die from anger. No, she was about to go crazy from anger. Just as Song Enya was about to go crazy, Song Yunshi said lightly from the side, stop clinging on to Yun Shusha. What? Song Enya suspected that she had heard wrongly. Was her brother speaking up for Yoon Shusha? Actually, to put it bluntly, you're just indignant. Enya, it's not that I want to nag at you, but stop pestering Uncle Moo. It's impossible for you and him to be together. Song Yoonshi looked at her calmly and said this. Why? Song Enya almost screamed out loud. Because, Song Enya suddenly said fiercely, don't say any nonsense that refutes ethics. I'm not listening. Song Yoonshi was stunned. This sister of his did not have any other shortcomings, but she was especially stubborn. She would never listen to others. However, she heard Song Enya say disdainfully, why is it impossible for Brother Moo and me? Aren't we just cousins? What's wrong with that? Foreign laws allow cousins to marry. Only the older generation in the country thinks that this is incest. Song Yoonshi said disapprovingly, whether they're cousins or not isn't the point at all. The point is that he doesn't have you in his heart. I think Uncle Moo is quite concerned about Yoon Shusha. Song Enya sneered fiercely. At the end of the day, it's clearly that vixen who shamelessly seduced Brother Moo. Does she really think that Brother Moo likes her? It's just a game. She's so stupid to really think that she can become young Madam Moo. Song Yoonshi, however, said coldly, I think Uncle Moo is quite concerned about her. You're deliberately opposing me, aren't you? If Brother Moo really likes that woman, why would he let her pursue a career in showbiz? The entertainment industry was so dirty. How many people were clean? If she was really his beloved woman, he wouldn't have let her develop in the entertainment industry. What's more, Brother Moo's misophobia is so serious that he won't allow his woman to do such a despicable thing as accompanying people to dinner. Song Yoonshi looked at her with love and helplessness in her eyes. My good sister, there are all kinds of good men in the world. Why do you have to revolve around a man? The outside world is so big, maybe you'll meet someone better. I can't meet him anymore, she said dejectedly. Song Yoonshi was shocked and looked at her in a daze. At the mention of Moo Yaja, the corners of Song Enya's lips curled into an incomparably gentle smile. She was no longer as harsh as before. Her entire heart softened, and her beautiful face seemed to glow with a breathtaking radiance. Brother Moo is so outstanding. I'll never meet a man who's more outstanding than him. In fact, what she was unwilling to admit was that perhaps Moo Yaja was sincere about Yoon Shusha. This was because, ever since that incident last time, Moo Yaja had ordered her to apologize to Yoon Shusha. However, given Song Enya's character, how could she be willing to do so? Hence, she did not listen to him at all. Chapter 1079. Song Enya was on the verge of breaking down. There were even a few times when she personally went to the entrance of the CEO's office in Dishing Building to block him. When he opened the door and saw her, he treated her like air and walked around her without even looking at her. She chased after him, but Moo Yaja entered the elevator as if there was no one there, closed the door, and left her standing there. Song Enya was desperate and embarrassed. Did she really have to apologize to Yoon Shusha personally before he would forgive her? Would he only talk to her? How could he be so cruel? How could he force her to such a state for a woman? She had been with him for more than 10 years. What was Yoon Shusha to him? Could it be that her many years of relationship with Brother Moo could not compare to Yoon Shusha? Was Brother Moo willing to use all means to protect Yoon Shusha? It would be hypocritical to say that she was not jealous. In fact, Song Enya was so jealous of Yoon Shusha that she could die. At the thought of how the man, whom she could only dream of, doted on her so much, her heart burned with jealousy. It was extremely unbearable. Song Enya said, Yoon Shusha isn't sincere to Brother Moo. She's with Brother Moo only because she has her eyes on his net worth of billions. Brother Moo, think about it. Brother Moo is the only heir of the Moo group. In the future, he'll be the head of the Moo family. Just based on this point alone, many women would flock to Brother Moo. Oh, is that so? Song Yoonshi expressed some doubts. In fact, although he did not know much about Yoon Shusha, he had met her once before. When he saw Yoon Shusha, her eyes were extremely clear. His eyes were very clear, without any impurities. He was probably a very pure person. In fact, if not for the entanglement between Song Enya and this woman, if he and Yoon Shusha were to get to know each other again, perhaps he would not hate this woman. Moreover, He had thought it through carefully after the incident. Given Song Enya's arrogant and unruly character, perhaps she had provoked Yoon Shusha first. His niece had been spoiled since she was a child, so he knew her best. She liked to kick up a fuss without reason. Perhaps she was the one who bullied Yoon Shusha first. Of course, he could only keep this thought to himself. After all, Song Enya was his younger sister. He could not help anyone but her. The next day, Yoon Shusha was caught as soon as she arrived at the company. Chin Ju angrily dragged her into the office. As soon as he closed the door, he went straight to the point and asked her, "I heard that something happened to you the day before yesterday." Ah! Yoon Shusha was taken aback by his question, which came out of nowhere. She was truly baffled by it. "Did Kong Xiaoqian invite you to dinner the day before yesterday?" Chin Ju asked in detail. Yoon Shusha was startled, then she nodded and said, "Yes." "You went?" "Yes." "Why are you so obedient? You just go when I tell you to. Are you stupid?" Chin Ju was furious as he tapped her head. "You usually refuse to serve me a cup of tea. When someone dug a trap for you to jump into, you really jumped into it obediently. Yoon Shusha, you usually look smart, but at the critical moment, your IQ has been fed to the dogs." Yoon Shusha looked bitter. "I didn't know that it was a Hongmen banquet." "You didn't know? Haven't you heard of Li Dongliang's reputation in the industry? He has ruined many female celebrities. If you're any dumber, you'll be next." Chin Ju was furious. Chapter 1080. Yoon Shusha was stunned and said, "Kong Xiaoqian only told me to meet an investor. She didn't say who it was. Also, I don't know what Li Dongliang's reputation is." Chin Ju was speechless. "Didn't I tell you that this industry is very messy? Also, without my order, you went to dinner without my permission. Didn't you think about the consequences?" Yoon Shusha knew that she was in the wrong. She was stupid and accepted the lecture obediently. Seeing her pitiful look, Chin Ju's heart softened. He couldn't help but touch her hair. "All right, I didn't mean to scold you. I was just worried that you would get hurt. You're so stupid. I'm really worried that you'll be eaten alive if I let you out. So exaggerated." "That's because you haven't seen anything more exaggerated. Anyway, in the future, don't act on your own without my order." Chin Ju paused and suddenly smiled. "But you're really good. You stabbed him with a pair of scissors. I heard that if you were a little more biased, Li Dongliang would have no descendants." Yoon Shusha stuck out her tongue. "Who asked him to offend me? Serves him right. You're still laughing. If Chairman Mu hadn't suppressed this matter, you would have been killed by Li Dongliang." Chin Ju couldn't help but scare her. Yoon Shusha was really shocked. "He's so powerful. What do you think? Do you know who's backing worldwide?" "What? Dream Fund? Isn't that the charity fund founded by Wu Lianjie?" Yoon Shusha was a little confused. Charity fund? That's because you don't know. This Dream Fund is just a financial institution that launders money in the name of charity. There are many big shots behind the Dream Fund, both in the government and in the underworld. Wu Lianjie is just the spokesperson. The big shots behind him are the real masters. On the surface, the Dream Fund is a charity organization. But behind the scenes, there are many underworld and legal forces fighting and killing. It involves the interests of many top tycoons. Of course, these can't be said out loud. Yoon Shusha was dumbfounded by what she heard. "So, why do you think those investors invested in the movie when they knew that they would lose all their money?" To put it bluntly, it was just a way to launder money. "It's nothing more than washing black into white," Chin Ju added. Yoon Shusha was completely speechless. It turned out that there were so many benefits involved. Be careful. This circle isn't as simple as you think. Dreams are just dreams, but reality is cruel. Yoon Shusha asked nervously, "What happened next?" "Not much. No matter how unreasonable Li Dongliang is, he still has to give face to Chairman Mu. That's why the matter has been suppressed. Li Dongliang didn't want to pursue this matter any further. This didn't mean that Mu Yaja would give up just like that. After this incident, Kong Xiaoqian was fired from her position at Huanyu. Disheng was also following up on the acquisition of the Kong Consortium. It could be said that Kong Xiaoqian had tried to steal a chicken only to end up losing the rice used to lure it. She had paid a terrible price. Because she had touched someone she shouldn't have. Of course, you're lucky to have profited from a disaster. Who knows, maybe the female lead role of Lin Ji will fall on your shoulders. Yun Shusha raised her eyebrows. You mean the female lead of Lethal Beauty? I'll fight for it with you. Who knows, there might be a chance. Qin Ju looked very excited. However, Yun Shusha suddenly poured cold water on him. Forget it. Since Lin Ji has already been decided internally, there's no need to fight for anything. Chapter 1081. Why? Are you stupid? I'm giving you this role for free. Don't you want it? No, I don't want it. I want to play the second female lead. I've read the script carefully. Qin Changle is a tragic character. It's quite interesting. It should be a good role to hone my acting skills. Qin Ju rolled his eyes. Yun Shusha smiled and said frankly, I like challenging roles. Qin Ju did not know whether to laugh or cry. You don't want to play a good role, and you want to play a villain? Do you know that this role is a typical evil supporting female lead? It's not a good role. Are you sure you want to play it? It's rare to find a challenging role. Just let me play it. Yun Shusha winked at him. Qin Ju could not do anything about it. Okay, then I'll go and finalize this with director Ji Yu in the afternoon. Once it's settled, don't regret it. Thus, the matter was settled. That day, Li Dongliang was discharged from the hospital. He had been living in fear for the past few days in the hospital. He was constantly worried that he had offended young Master Mu. He did not know what would happen next. Although he had some power behind him, they were all connected by interests. No one would risk offending Disheng Financial Group for him. Just as he was so scared, he received a chilling invitation the moment he was discharged from the hospital. It was said that Mu Yaja had set up a banquet at Yongye private clubhouse to treat him, saying that he wanted to apologize to him. Apologize? Did he hear it wrong? He had almost slept with his woman, and now he wanted to apologize to him? It must be the other way around. However, Mu Yaja's men said that Li Dongliang had been hurt so badly that he should do something. Although it felt strange, Li Dongliang did not dare to refuse the invitation. How would he dare to refuse Mu Yaja? Thus, he hurried to the banquet. As soon as he arrived at the private room, he found that the original cast who had attended the banquet that day were all there. A few of them were famous producers, and a few were investors. Even Sun Hua was there. Li Dongliang looked around and felt that this banquet was not as simple as it seemed. Was it a Hongmen banquet? With this suspicion, he turned around and wanted to retreat. Just as she turned around and lifted her leg, she bumped into Mu Yaja, who had just entered the room. When Mu Yaja walked in and his tall figure appeared in the room, the large living room suddenly became extremely narrow. He was tall and straight. When he stood next to Li Dongliang, the difference in height was obvious. He was wearing a dark red shirt today, which made his handsome face look even more seductive. Although the word bewitching didn't seem to be appropriate when used on a man. However, it was especially appropriate to use it on Mu Yaja. Ordinary people wearing clothes of this color would look very tacky. However, on his body, it was very elegant. Especially on his handsome face, it was white and charming. Li Dongliang looked at him in a daze. This was his first time meeting such a distinguished person like Mu Yaja. When he thought about what had happened a few days ago, he felt an inexplicable sigh in his heart. When Mu Yaja saw him, a sly smile appeared on his cold face. His good-looking eyebrows raised slightly. What's wrong? You're leaving? Mu. Chairman Mu. You're here. I was wondering if I should go to the door to welcome you. Li Dongliang explained, breaking out in cold sweat. Mu Yaja smiled coldly. Haha, there's no need. You're injured. Sit down first.